getting started here, and then also for everybody to go around and introduce themselves as well. Joe, maybe you can move over just slightly more, can you?
Should I move to the side?
A little bit more, keep going. Keep going, a little bit.
Come on.
There you go, there you go. That's it, there you go.
My lap is not far away.
Should I sit on the floor?
No, sit down.
I do laps, it's fine.
You do many things, I can see that. Oh, bloody hell, okay, right. Okay, so we are, this is Entanglement, the real first one of this term. Last week was a fake one. And we will now go around and introduce ourselves. Mike, since you have to leave, maybe you could start.
Okay. Can I be a little bit longer?
Yes,
Yeah, but not
Okay.
too long at all.
okay.
All right. Well, first I'd like to welcome you all to the European Parliament. You've all got a chair at the table.
Yes,
Does anyone want to leave?
nobody wants to leave.
No one wants to leave. All right. Okay. I think you're going to get a talk on Foucault. Are you going to have a seminar around Foucault today?
Yes.
I think last time I went to a Foucault seminar was actually with the late Stuart Marshall. He was my lecturer in 1980 something at the RCA when I was in a department called Environmental Media. So I'm Mike Stubbs. I'm the director of FACT, the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology in Liverpool. I'm a school failure who got lucky at art. Should have been a motorbike mechanic.
And you like triumphs?
I do indeed. So I live in Liverpool where FACT is based, but I work around the world on various projects. I know quite a lot about quite a lot. So in a way, I haven't done a PhD. So in a way, I don't know if I'm truly expert at anything, but I'm a great all-rounder. I think I'm a late developer. Still learning.
There's still time.
There's still
Yes,
time.
and there's still openings in the PhD program.
And I'm
Just saying.
beginning to re-engage in making an artwork for the first time in 17 years. The first one I've made in 17 years. I did have a show at Tate and at the Baltic, and so I did have quite a good career making short films and television. But then accidentally became a bureaucrat. So I now run a major institution, which I hope you're all going to come to at some point. We've been in discussion about a day trip or a 2-day trip or something or other up in Liverpool, which of course is the most visited city outside London for art and culture. Home to a Biennale, and in 2018 we will be celebrating 10 years on since the successful European Capital of Culture, which of course is the last English capital of culture, because we can no longer have it because we're no longer going to be in Europe.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to pull out.
Okay. Lived in Australia before I was in Liverpool, before I was in Scotland, England. My interests sort of range from performance art, situationalism, expanded cinema, short film, television, and I'll talk to anybody about anything. And at some point, when there's more time, I'm looking forward to actually seeing your work and finding out what you're interested in and what you want to make. And if I can share what I know, I will.
Thank you. Can you just, I know that was, and it was an excellent introduction, can you just say what's happening in the next couple of months at FACT?
Okay. So at the moment we've got a new commission by an artist called Wu Sang, who is a trans Chinese-American artist working with a choreographer called Boy Child. She's also made a new commission for FACT, collaborating with a Ethiopian New Yorker called Kalela, who's a kind of right on R&B star, and Bjork has tipped as being the next big thing. So 2 distinctive works, which I think are off for about another month or so. So that's outgoing. I'm ramping up a whole program around the future world of work, which is one of my sort of pet research subjects, thinking about working life, automation, gig economy, precarity, trade unionism, so on and so forth. We've got a program around sustainability and climate change, which is in development. Another program, well, I suppose we talk about Liverpool Biennale this summer. 2 artists not contracted yet. In the autumn, program around art and science, working with CERN in Geneva. And you know, they're just a few things.
Which is, you know, I mean, you thought you were busy. I mean, thank you very much, pleasure to have you. So why don't we do like a coil? We'll start with Osa and we'll go like this around and we'll end on Shannon.
Thanks very much.
Okay?
Okay, my name is Åsa, sort of sitting in the middle and being very tall. I'm a PhD student based in Fanart, focusing on the photograph as my method. So in short, I'm looking at two notions, the notion of queer and the notion of difference.
Wait, stop just a second. We've got like a pantomime going on here. What is happening with this plug? Something's happening with the
Despina would
plug.
like her pile of things.
One more cup. We need one more cup.
I'm sorry about this, Osa, but there was there was like a chorus happening here. What was all this going on?
Despina wants her pile of things.
She wants her pile of things.
I think it's some bubbles coming out of the sparkling water potentially. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
Just need my stuff.
no, how rumors begin. Okay,
That sounds
you need your stuff. Oh, I see. That was OC.
And my water.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I see. Okay, sorry about that,
That's right.
Osa. Let's try it again. So you were rehearsing. We will get to the seminar
Okay,
today.
I'll do very short now. Okay, so I'm focusing on the notions of queer and difference using a photograph. So, well, I'm basically arguing that I'm taking as a starting point the dominant idea of photograph as transparent, and thinking about the photograph as materials is talking a lot about the surface as a skin. So referring to these materials as photographic matter, that's starting to become something where I'm querying the practice as well as talking about responsibility.
And can you just mention, anybody that has a piece that's going to be in the entanglement thing tomorrow, can you just do half a word on what you're doing with that?
So I'm at the moment now, I feel like I'm returning to work I've produced already, and I feel like there's still a production. So actually, building on a conversation Johnny and I had at a supervision meeting, I'm gonna return to a work I've made between 2015 and 17 called Looking Out and Kicking In, and I'm gonna present a few pieces of those.
And are you also going to be pulling off the Polaroid skins that you were doing?
No. I have another piece called Skin that I've showed,
Yeah.
but as I mentioned in an email, I can't show them tomorrow because
You can't get the vitrine.
I can't get hold of a table.
Okay.
I've checked everywhere else here and I can't bring one in.
Okay.
So I'm going to show prints tomorrow,
Okay.
but
Let's remember that. Yeah. Okay.
they're built on a conversation we had in
Upside down prints.
They'll be upside down.
Yeah. Good. Martin.
Oh, yes, thank you for having me here. I'm Martin Reinhardt from Vienna. I just flew in yesterday night on the very kind invitation of Johnny. And our entanglement is a little bit confusing, but nevertheless interesting. I met Johnny some, whatever, years ago in
2004. I think.
Yeah.
3.
in a very boring conference, and basically the only people alive were the two of us, and so we stayed in contact, and
We were a fan club of 2.
yeah, and we always kind of fantasized about having an art project together, and as things went, we now have one. It's artistic research project funded by the Austrian Science Fund, and it's completely weird, and we will show some excerpts tomorrow. It's basically about how to organize meaning in a meaningful way and to make it accessible. And it's kind of a weird mixture between technology, art and philosophy.
Can you just tell people why you named the project Datalome or Marl?
Yeah. Okay, so we the way we look at data is more like it's physical matter, and this is true. Like this idea kind of manifests in more than one way, and one of these ways is that we apply rules of physics, like mathematically, to information, and we just see how information clumps together, or just wants to build structures, or how things that are connected kind of get a closer relationship than others, and some fall apart. So it's more like it's more physics than biology, if you want to. And we also, and the big problem we are encountering is, so let's before I start all this, so if I talk about data, just imagine maybe big data, or even easier, the holdings of a library. So there's information stored in books, and there's information stored in words, and these words represent meaning, and they somehow are interconnecting to text, and texts are correlating to other texts, and so on and so on and so on. So just imagine that we want to build something like a GPS system for meaning. Because
that's a very good way of putting it.
yeah,
actually.
because with GPS, people, they don't, the whole idea of information that is based on popularity becomes stupid when you sit in a car and you want to go to a place, because you have a certain address you want to go, and it doesn't really matter if it's popular or not. It's just you want to find your way through this world, or this system of streets and pathways and whatever. And why shouldn't it be equal with knowledge, or information, or meaning, or whatever word you use? So you want to explore a certain sphere of knowledge or meaning, and the question is how would you go there, and once you're there, how would you move around, and how could you kind of reach or collect the things that are useful for you? And I think that basically we are in a profound crisis when it comes to knowledge management, because at the moment these so-called search engines are basically reality distortion machines that kind of, they create a virtual reality that does not represent anything in the end. And we've been working on trying to find alternative solutions to that. And so we came up with this whole idea that rather like on a semantic correlation, we use other ways to define attractions, or the closeness from one point of information to the others, and describe it as vectors. And of course, this is very, on a technical basis, this is very intense in terms of computing, because you basically have to correlate every single point in space with every other single point in space, and you have to generate a structure that expresses the distance from every single point to the other single point. And what you get is, in the end, is basically a multi-dimensional GPS system, what we call the topography of meaning, the topography of information, whatever.
And it's been very much in terms of poetics and sense and erotics and all
Well,
the
we
rest
hope
of
that all it's in the end. That's why John is in the team, because of course we.
Is that a dirty mind?
Yeah, because she has a dirty mind, first of all, and
Could be worse.
and the problem exactly starts where, in ambiguous terms. So,
Yeah.
so language is not this kind of, one purpose, one direction thing. It's a word or a meaning can change over time, or it can point to many other things. And in our aim, to make it maybe short, is that we want to develop a system that gets more precise the more information it can hold. So at the moment the problem is that people have the impression that when you put more information into a database or whatever, it gets diluted.
Hold
And
on.
it's
Barnaby, there's a chair here. Yep, sorry.
And so what we basically want to build is something that gets more precise the more information you put in. So every addition enhances.
It can't be
This
that
is
difficult.
Barnaby.
New data is
Sorry to interrupt.
You can crawl if you like.
My God, this is a proper old obstacle course, isn't it?
With the bag.
Mind the beach ball.
The beach ball.
Okay?
Yeah?
Yeah,
Oh,
you want
yeah,
that beach
sure.
ball broken. You can throw it out over here. This group hasn't played with it yet.
water, please.
Sorry. This?
Yes?
Yeah, okay.
Ah, there's a ball.
A beach ball. Okay. All right, Martin, thank you.
So that's basically the scope of the research program we're kind of doing now for 1 year, and I have no clue whatsoever what in the end we will have or have not, but I think it's of key importance to start this conversation, to start this, to start an alternative thinking and to see how lame in the end the internet became. It's kind of when this all started, we as scholars all had this fantastic idea that finally that all of the humans' knowledge are kind of accessible. There will be kind of out of itself. There will be wonderful things which we could not even.
There were one or two naysayers about that, I think. I'm just saying. Yeah.
And well, I just don't want to quit
Yeah.
on this dream, and so we dream on.
And the other thing is that one of the things that Martin and Leo and Mattia, who you all know, who's also working on the founding, is also involved with this project, is that the way in which something can be searched, apart from being GPS, is in three-dimensional space, and it creates a visualization that is in fact inhabitable. And this is very, very important because it gets a sense of compression, it gets a sense of tension or intensities that don't happen in the typical algorithms, so that one has a different way of finding out not just knowledge, but the poesis of knowledge. So, which is what gets in the algorithmic moves of Google and the other search engines. What happens is that it strips out the sensuousness, if we put it like that, or the meaning, as you were saying, the senses, and it tries to get to the cleanest version. But you can get to a very clean version, or maybe it's a very dirty version. I'm not sure which one it is, but anyway, a very elegant version. By looking at it in different dimensions as opposed to in the Cartesian rational, but it requires a notion of complexity, and it also works off of infinite play as opposed to limited play, which is so the fear of the Google networking environments in particular is that there's too much, you can't erase anything, but what Datalome does is it requires as much, it just requires more and more and more. Not less and less and less. So it's not cutting away, and it's not programming. It's a learning tool. It's an artificial. It's a morphogenesis as opposed to a metamorphosis.
Yeah, well, if something is messy, it's just messy.
It's just messy. It stays messy.
Yeah, it stays messy.
Yeah.
There's no idea to say everything has to be on the same level or same structure or quality or whatever, because how would you get the messy out of the messy? I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I also just want to say that Martin also invented the TX transformer, which is used in the Spielberg films, and you did other garbage. What was it? You have a mad studio with all these little parts. Do you still have that studio with all your little engineering tools?
No, I stopped it.
Okay.
But Tommy always has a tendency to.
I have to
make
bring
it
in
look better
this.
than
Yeah,
it is.
that's all right. Might as well.
You made a film with Martin.
Yes, I did. Yeah, we did a film called Dreams Rewired, which took us 15 years, and it finally was finished 2 years ago. And it's about media utopia. So it's the history of media Topias.
Didn't win some award in New York.
We won the Russian documentary prize of best documentary in Moscow. Yeah.
Just saying.
And if you want to see the film,
It was in New York when it's all clean.
yeah, I can send you a download link
Great.
so
Please.
for everyone who wants to. I give it to
Thanks.
Johnny. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Anya?
I'm Anya. I'm first year research student, filmmaker. I'm looking at a constantly changing topology photography also, but it's mainly feminist new materialism, queer feminist new materialism, and fiction writing, and how that might be kind of transformed or expand the notion of filmmaking.
Great.
Digital filmmaking, yeah.
And what can you just say what your project is for, you're doing something that you had to,
Carnival.
no, not for the,
No.
you're not in the carnival, but you're doing something for, that you had to ask for TechNet.
Oh, yes, I'm in kind of, but this is insane.
Pull
I'm
this,
just,
pull this out. Yeah, go.
no, I'm doing an exhibition in July, but I'm making all new work for it, so I don't really know exactly what I'm doing yet, but.
Okay, that was not
Yeah.
very. Fair enough, okay.
That's my life.
That's okay, that's good, Despina.
Hi. My name is Despina and I'm a third year PhD student. I work with live performance and I'm working on the idea of the monstrous as something that is connected with revelation and concealment, sexuality, BDSM, yeah.
And what are you doing for, Entanglement?
I'm gonna do hopefully a live performance in combination with a video projection.
Which, can you just, why did you leave out the fact that you're stapling yourself?
Because I didn't want to say it, but you just did.
No,
yeah.
but I think it's really important. I don't think we should be.
Yeah, but
embarrassing.
people
wanted
should
this to be a
encounter it,
surprise.
Johnny. Why should they know from in advance?
No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think it takes
Anyway,
away.
now you know. I'm stapling my body.
But you don't know how she's stapling the body.
Yeah. That's
And
it.
what you're thinking between showing a video of it and performing, what's the relationship between that you're trying to discuss?
I wanted, well, everything for me in my practice. Everything is defined by the space. I did some tryouts. I never rehearse. I just feel the space and see, and I have the sense if something works or not. So my idea wouldn't work in that specific space, and then I wanted to show a video of the idea that I had, but then I don't really like showing documentation of my work. And then I had this idea of investigating the relationship between the live performance and the video. So I would like to, in a sense, reenact the performance that is in the video while hearing it. But again, this of course will fail in many points. So the actual work is this encounter between the live work and the documented work.
Great, thank you.
Do you know Kira O'Reilly?
Yes, I met her, yeah.
I'm Barnaby. I'm a 9-year veteran of these weekly sessions, so I'm not quite sure whether that just makes me an addict or
Nothing's wrong with being an addict.
nothing's wrong with being an addict. Good. I'm writing about George Bataille and or in George Bataille, and I'm interested in scissoparity, pain, pullulation, and knowledge.
And do you want to explain any of those words?
Scissoparity is the division, in particular kind of a material division.
I thought you were going to explain pain.
Pain is what's implied when something divides. If you're not, if you're moving away from mathematics and into a different logic of a bio life logic. I'm sort of interested in this term bio life, which is the material experience of an ontological existence, if you like.
And can you say what you're doing for Entanglement?
Yeah, I'm going to show a video which lasts 12 minutes, and it is it was words which came to me in a dream, and so I thought it must be a manifesto, a political manifesto, because that's where political manifestos should come from. So I wrote them down immediately, which is one of the great inventions of having a phone and a phone charger next to your bed. And I prepared this video with some found YouTube footage, and having included the manifesto in the video. It's a very short manifesto.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of one of the words?
Hey.
That's right.
Isn't one of them? I think that might well be the encounter though. Well, it's
Don't stay in.
The manifesto is called Pullulation Manifesto, and pullulation, if nobody knows about that word, is both it has a general lexicographical meaning of swarming, but it also has a biological definition, which is the division and asexual reproduction. So the division of a singular being into into more than one part. And so I'm looking at that. Well, the manifesto is looking at that as a sort of a beyond of numbers, numerology, a beyond of the number line.
Okay.
What constitutes a mass. And what constitutes singularity?
M-A-S-S, mass, not M-E-S-S, mass.
A mass, yeah.
Mass, okay, great, thank you. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna, a first year research student, and in my work I look at entanglement of posthumanism and supernatural, but supernatural looked through the lens of scientific. And in particular, I look at the human body transition, or transition from the human body, and the notion of a human ghost, and also new forms of poetics which can evolve from that entanglement.
And can you say what you're doing for the thing with your brainwaves?
Yeah, like for tomorrow, I'm going to recite one of my writings, which is pretty much just like unconscious stream of thoughts put on words, unedited, and at the same time you will see what's going on inside of my brain, actually coming back to that experience of living these writings. And this, I work with EEG, and the EEG data would be translated live into CGI and live sound.
So when you say see inside your brain, what does that literally mean? You're not going to be in an MRI scan, right? So how are you going to do that?
It's the device I'm wearing. It has microchip, and microchip will read the data of my brain.
Good. Yeah. Or whatever you want to call it.
Hey, my name's Maria, but I'm also known as James in this group.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, so perhaps James. But I'm working with I'm a second year research student, and I'm working with performance, in particular delegated performance, focusing on aspects of delegation and putting people into a space in order to mediate my experience of a certain space and to inhabit and embody these particular characters and protagonists, which are themselves constructed through various structures, through various forms of series and repetitions, in combination with objects in that space. So I guess fundamentally it's related to forms of realism, literary realism and neorealism, and kind of looking at the history of realism and how it relates to contemporary forms of performance.
It's kind of like looking at the really real, something like that this thing that's called real, right?
Yeah.
And often in your work anyway, it's been very pugilistic. There's always some kind of boxing going on or some kind of weird attack. right?
Some sort of cruelty or violence, or cruelty and taking your hands off pain created either through contact or
So in distinction from Barnaby, where the pain is created through the division, your pain is created through the contact.
yeah.
Just saying. Good, great. Okay, you know, I'm Johnny. I'm going to be, the most latest thing I'm working on right now is a thing called From Drone Consciousness to Radical Empathy, Wandering in the Zero Zones of Time. It's a paper that I'll be giving at UCL in their Science and Madness project. It's called something else, but I can't remember the title of it. Anyway, next week, I think it is. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, I'm Desmond. I'm a third-year part-time research student, so I'm kind of in it for the long haul. My sort of I'm trying to square things at the moment, and I guess I'm sort of, among other things, I'm particularly interested in the idea of public space and how that's, and the morphology of that, the topography of public space, and how it's indicated through the monument or the object, and sort of coinciding with that is an interest in deep time and sort of post-human landscape and the landscape of catastrophe as well.
So Desmond, this is Desmond's first time here. He's been very brave. He's not mentioned that. A newbie, so we're going to pick on him. So by deep time, what's the difference between that and, let's say, shallow time?
I'm thinking, I guess I'm sort of seeing two times. I'm seeing the time that I'm standing in, and the origins of where I'm standing in from a much further prehistory, perhaps a kind of a period of time. So I'm geologically, so that some of my work has been I've been particularly interested in the deep time of the Cretaceous period and the lower Cretaceous period specifically, and the morphology of a particular fossil from that period, which is a heteromorph. And I'm interested in heteromorphy and something other. There's something with a difference to the other kinds of morphologies. So for me, the deep time is something that generates the now where I'm standing, I suppose.
And would you say that is then a continuous, let's say, relationship between deep time and the now?
Yes, I'm interested in that. Yes.
And then the second question I have, or another way in, are you looking at Delanda's work then?
That's been Margarita's tipped me off on Delanda. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you doing practice-led
Yes.
work? So what's the practice about?
The practice is a combination of field work, so films based on public spaces that I've sort of investigated through a kind of a fieldwork practice, and also a drawing practice, and object making out a drawing.
And the very last thing, and then I'll
That's all.
is, Deleuze and Guattari write about capitalism and schizophrenia, for example. And one of the things about the way in which they talk about this as the multiple tongue, Deleuze-Guattari, is that this the schizophrenia is the ability to see oneself outside oneself whilst being oneself. That's one of the great virtues of being schizophrenic, And I'm wondering if the deep time is a kind of eyeball for you that enables a seeing of what the now time in this kind of eye, of the schizo eye. Does that make any
Yeah,
sense?
it does make sense.
Okay, I'll just throw it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Daria.
Hello, my name is Daria. I'm a first year research student, practice-led. And I'm in a certain way trying to teach algorithms how to disobey. Because they usually
It's
obey.
a futile.
Yeah, it's a kind of futile task, but it has this connection to Bataille's notion of desire as transgression, of breaking the rules and moving away from what we do every day, but kind of this explosion of desire. And we usually teach now algorithms how to do things and how to learn, but not how to know. So this notion of knowing and learning, kind of understanding the difference between those. And so I will be showing in the carnival like something that I called like degree zero of this algorithmic art, or kind of intelligent art is basically an algorithm that draws like randomly on the screen. It's like a random walk until it hits the edge and starts again at the in the middle of the screen. So it has like extremely simple rules, like it's as dumb as possible, which is say, okay, this is like kind of, it can't do anything much, but it also deals with the idea that even though it's two lines of codes, there's like 10,000s of lines of codes that lie behind that in order for me to just put these two frameworks and work with that. And then the other work is something that's called gesture-based drawing, which is turning this gesture, like you have, it's not representational, so there's nothing like to kind of recognize in the drawing, but it's kind of a gesture-based drawing, and it's connected to algorithms in a sense that it's not only that we teach algorithms what to do and know what to do, it's also algorithms teaching us, and actually this attention economy that is happening today, like algorithms telling us what to do. In this certain sense, I want them also tell us how to do art, like in this gesture-based drawing.
Very Warhol.
And the same as Saul a little bit and all that stuff, but kind of maybe not like me having this idea how to do it, but having like headphones and algorithm telling me, okay, do this line or whatever.
So how come you changed your title of your thesis to the I Transgress or whatever it is?
Yeah, the change because when the first the title of the thesis was first becoming opaque, which was dealing with the idea of, also connected to your work in the sense of transparency, and how if we make the representation in a certain sense opaque, we would recognize that it's not the thing that we are seeing, but it's the image of the thing. And it also connects to the notion of desire in Deleuze and Guattari. And what I realized with the time is that, and the huge help from Johnny, is that
surely not.
is that the desire I'm interested in is actually Bataillean desire, this kind of desire that
transgress. Help from Barnaby more than me.
Yes, to transgress this, to actually break the rules, and that's where this idea with algorithms comes. When I'm also about building now drawing machines which are doing infinite loops, but the condition of infinite loop is like draw the circle as long as 2 + 2 = 4. And then when the batteries run out, the question is, are they empty, or is 2 + 2 not anymore equal 4? So so it is kind of.
And you read Gerald Nessler's piece on derivatives. Did it help you?
I started reading. I haven't read it yet.
Okay, never mind about that. Okay, thank you. This is one of our postdocs.
Hi, my name is Dani, and I'm working with Johnny and Martin on the Datalon project. And I'm looking at it through the lens of science fiction at the moment, and continuing on what I did for my PhD, which was at the Central European University in Budapest, at the Gender Studies department. And it was about Mary Shelley and H.G. Wells, and it was about how these narratives, the ways in which they construct the human, different ways in which they construct the human, always in relation to something which is defined as the non-human. So I was exploring that, and currently I'm interested in contemporary sci-fi and dystopia, such as the TV series Black Mirror.
Yeah.
And so this techno-dystopian setting and the ways in which then the advanced technology is seen to change what we think we know the human is.
Doctor Who does it as well. People in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Interesting. Great.
And about the carnival, so I'm not sure.
Are you going to do the chorus? I think that sounds
Oh,
fantastic.
and I sing in a choir, and I thought at one point that we might like perform a few songs. But
that'd be great.
it's too short a notice, so I wasn't able to
So
Can you
get
just do the
get
Can you just sing
No,
along?
I can't sing along.
Can you be the
no.
choir?
I can't be the
Can you
choir.
do the sing with the whole chord?
Record you and play you over.
I can't be the choir. I thought that there would be at least like 3 or 4 people, but now everybody said that.
We can help.
We can help.
There are people here.
But I don't know. But about the paper, because I thought that I would be giving a paper, but if it doesn't fit with the overall,
It doesn't fit in the
that's
lecture
fine.
hall.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to do the paper within the Dyson Cafe, then it would work. But in,
I could do it, but
Yeah.
the thing is, I'm thinking how it can work.
we can work that out over dinner.
I can't come to dinner.
Okay. We can work that out without you over dinner.
We will decide for
You
you.
can sing it.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have
Okay.
a discussion. Can you be there tomorrow?
Yeah, I will be
Early.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
of
if you come
course.
early, then we'll sort it out.
Okay, but I mean, if it fits within the whole setting, then it's fine.
Yeah,
If it doesn't, that's also
yeah.
okay. I mean,
good, thanks.
I'm Catherine. I'm interested in improvisation and embodied movement, and also with the help of Johnny,
Oh my
have started to name things that make sense in terms of the idea of using improvisation is to break down habits, societal rules. I don't want to say ritual, but I'm going to say it, but sometimes I think we need to change habits into rituals to make them more energy creating. So I'm studying inertia and intensity, and pushing both of those ideas towards exhaustion, and through exhaustion whether you could actually create immanence or create transubstantiation or transformation. All that, for some reason, is continually undermined, that's not the word, I guess, but the underlying study seems to be plasticity, and I couldn't even tell you why. But it keeps coming up, both the plasticity of performance, the plasticity of materials, plasticity of the human body.
You can just hang on to that, because you must have some,
Yeah.
you'll figure it out. So you're not hanging upside down, right?
I'm going to be doing something upside down, but I'm not
Okay.
hanging off we got the riggers, but we didn't get the building and the state. So I will be probably doing a headstand on the Dyson cafes,
Okay, that's good.
doing the Flower Garland Sutra citing the Flower Garland Sutra. And I need 2 people to spot me if you're interested. We can talk about it over dinner.
Yes, I said to Martin, it's so difficult because Catherine, I mentioned Judy Martin, I said, because Catherine wants to hang upside down off the balcony and we just can't do this. I just think it's like mad. And he's like, it's not mad. It's a whole tradition of doing this.
And actually, it turns out that the new deputy of Dangerous Mike.
Yeah, Dangerous Mike.
Dangerous Mike has a new deputy, which is this lovely Indian woman. She's just watching me talk to Mike. Mike came and had lunch with us to talk about this again. And she looks at me, she goes, you know what? I'm Indian. I grew up in India and things are more possible. She saw somebody. I don't know how she got some idea from school about hanging upside down, got her mother to construct something for her, and came back from school every day and spent 6 hours hanging upside down throughout her whole childhood.
wow.
So Mike is going to construct me a place which anybody can use to hang upside down when we want to, and maybe even here.
Okie dokie. Well, there's also okay, yeah. That's why I think no is just an obstacle you need to learn to leap over. Like no. Okay. So all good. Lauren, thank you.
My name is Lauren, and the working title of my research is the non-metrics of art and parapherics and breakouts. I've been most recently I've just been sort of kind of restructuring, well, not really restructuring. I've been looking at the 2 chunks of writing that I have in work in progress and trying I've now got a sort of a shorter structure of them to review and kind of help me sort of focus and reorganise it. But I suppose in terms of what I'm sort of currently looking at, not that this is representative, I've been watching Klasowski's, I've been reading Klasowski's The Living Currency, rereading that, and then I've been watching Raoul Barreth's the stolen, the hypothesis of the stolen painting and the suspended vocation because of their relation to Klosowski. The hypothesis of the stolen painting is collaboration with Klosowski. But actually on the video there was a really interesting, there was an interview with Raoul Ref, and in it he said that he would never forgive Klosowski for breaking, I think it's Artemis's or Dionysus' bow, which was quite interesting if you see the film. No, but the thing about the film is, it's got multiple levels, but he goes through, there's this sort of collector character, and he goes through these different sort of 8 paintings or 7 paintings, one of them's missing, but there's a sort of telling of this sort of narration of it. They're in this sort of house-like environment where they go through these rooms, and then there's characters of like living tableaus in each room which are related to the paintings. But they all have very particular sort of gestures, well, because it's a sort of tableau, but these gestures are sort of choreographic and also like constellational kind of, but near the end of the kind of like speaking about these paintings, he talks about how each of the characters is making an arc. It's sort of like a cosmic, there's a sort of, there's a sort of space-time element. So I'm also looking at Bergson and the debate between Bergson and Einstein and kind of notions of space or radical. So there was a nice connection with this kind of like film with what in how it didn't seem to relate, but it does. And the other aspect is sort of drawing together sort of obviously with the living currency. He's looking at Sade and Fourier. They contrast in their work, and he sort of cites Sade's work as like kind of that sort of step prior to Freud, like what kind of this sort of is what I'm interested in terms of how you connect the economy of the libidinal and the sexual, but to the notions of event, rather than just coming at it in a sort of like through the mathematical lineage, because I'm also reading like Simon Duffy's book on Deleuze's engagement with like Lautman as a key figure, and I've been trying to get to the bottom of what he calls as the static genesis in Lautman's work. So, but I haven't got to the bottom of it yet. Anyway, that's where we are.
Okay, thank you, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Frances. I'm a third year student in critical writing, which means that I'm not a practice-based research student. Although I kind of find that really problematic because I'm a writer and
That's practice-based.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but it's not regarded as practice-based, it's thesis-based. Because, yeah, so it's kind
I
of
will shift over into our group.
Yeah.
You know, you can still do your writing.
Thank you. So yes, I'm writing the thesis. What I'm doing, okay, so I'm doing a collaborative doctoral award with the RCA, obviously, and with the Science Museum. They're my partner institution. The short answer, if someone says, what are you studying? I say I'm writing a history of electronic music and sound through the story of one particular studio and electronic sound company in London in the 60s and 70s. And that is what I'm doing.
So not a lie. Excellent. Okay.
Are you going to tell us which one?
What are you really doing?
Yeah, what am I really doing?
Shut the door.
Shut the
Not
camera.
YouTube. Yeah, shut the camera.
That's kind of what I was given this, this scholarship to do, is to research and write a history of EMS, which was a studio and a company that built synthesizers and other devices. And as I'm doing that, I came to this with a sort of long-standing interest in how we write histories of technology, particularly sonic technologies. And as so one layer of what I'm doing is all those things you have to do to write a history, i.e. research, oral histories, working in archives, but kind of, I wouldn't say on top of or beneath or somewhere next to that, I'm trying to really think through how I'm doing this history, what it means to write a history of this kind of technology and this kind of work as well, because it's very much a history of work and the workplace and how work is done. And I'm trying to sort of situate it, sort of, what am I doing? No, I'm in my 30s.
Lay on the table.
So I'm losing my mind. Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way of doing that, which also shows that I understand that it is not a straightforward thing to do. I'm very interested in ideas of technological progress which are not about linear kind of progress from A to B. I'm reading a lot of Stiegler, obviously techniques and time is kind of symbolic misery, kind of big things that feed into this. And also new writings around organology from the musicological point of view, the study of instruments, and how that's kind of extended in the current sort of situation of electronic instruments and other devices.
Do you know Stein in Amsterdam?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you go there a lot?
No, I haven't ever been.
Oh, you
but
should
I know
go.
quite a lot about it.
We should all go. In fact, I'm going to
I
organize
mean,
it.
I have a sort of background in writing about those kinds of institutions and how they function. The one I'm writing about is very different. It's less of a public sort of art institution and more of a commercial company.
Yeah.
Was it EMS, you said?
Yeah, not the
Yeah.
one in Stockholm, the one in London,
Yeah.
the one that built the VCS3,
Yeah.
etc. I think the other thing I just want to sort of say this because I'm doing this in an art college. I come from being a music and sound critic. I also have a background in media and contemporary music studies. And when I bring this idea to discussions like this that I'm writing about electronic music, I find that people immediately tune out of why and how I'm doing it and just want to discuss what they think of as that term, what that term means, the genre that they think it means. So I'll say electronic music and someone will say Detroit techno, or someone will say Stockhausen, or whatever it is that they think that is, and they want to discuss that. And that's great, and I'm happy to have those discussions everywhere, but when I'm here I feel like I want to kind of get a bit away from that and try and...
You come to the right place.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to ask you that here.
Because
not in this
in
here.
humanities research, that kind of happens sometimes.
Yeah, well.
People just say, oh, do you know about such and such? Or they just, I'll show a picture of a synthesizer and of course it looks great, so people just want to talk about how great it looks. And really, I'm trying to kind of get a bit beyond that with my writing and really interrogate what it means to be the writer of this history, right?
Great. You need to read a little bit of Heidegger.
Yeah, I know.
We'll
I
get
have
to
read
that.
a bit.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Fran. Do you like to go by Francis or Fran?
Francis. Please.
Francis, okay.
Oh, I'm a Jamu. I'm a first year practice late read student. I'm currently working under the title of Lubricia Sensorium.
Oh, you're so funny.
And basically,
Yeah, you always change the title.
I change it every week.
It's a good hobby.
And basically,
And what did you just say? I didn't.
Lubricia Sensorium.
The previous week he had something.
Sensorial
Yes, so basically, it's about I'm exploring the fog to dark room in terms of kind of tactility and sensation, and plus also I'm to explore the sex dark room as well. And part of the work would be I'm working with kink identified objects that's been created or constructed. I'm to have pleasure with. So I'm basically a lot of the kind of conversations around photography, I think it's kind of still trapped in kind of the image, and then actually kind of not kind of talking about the image as an object. And so really kind of that's where I'm kind of work wants to shift to, is to talk about photography in a very different kind of way. And then within that, then a lot of the things I've been reading about photography forgets about the darkroom. So I'm basically kind of, that's the space I kind of want to kind
Can
of
you
head
say a
back
little
to.
bit, I mean, you've been in international photographer for 20 years or more, let's say. Just put it at 20, it's a good number. 21, odd number. But can you say how you moved from doing like a kind of BDSM environment with your and your films are always very sharp, your photographs are always very sharp and very they're usually black and white. I don't think I've ever seen any of them in color.
No,
Yeah.
no.
And then you moved from that to thinking about the archive,
Yeah.
and now you've gone back, or you've gone laterally or something like that to the dark room.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about that journey?
Well, basically, I think for me that the dark room, photo dark room, sex dark rooms, back room, they are kind of an archive of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So so there's histories, there's things that people do. And of course, then the thing about like I'm let's say sex dark rooms, even dance dance floors, there is a difficulty in archiving those moments that people can come together very quickly. Mm-hmm. But then actually part of what I'm trying to articulate is another way to experience the medium. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm also kind of a lot of the conversations around photography at the moment, I think, is kind of trapped within around dialogue with kind of analog versus digital. Mm. And for me, then I'm getting back to the dark room. I'm working with platinum prints. That's the plan. Isn't actually, it's a hybridization of those two things that actually has allowed me, quote unquote, to go back. Yeah. So it really isn't to move away from this kind of binary framework about kind of image versus object, and so on and so forth, and then to kind of to coming at it in a very different kind of way that is still sensual, it's still tactile, it does all those kind of things.
And just one last thing,
Yeah.
You're going to have 8 images in Entanglement.
Yes.
And can you just say a word about how you chose them or what they are?
So the 8 images were shown at FACT.
That's amazing. Beautiful, joyous photographs.
Yeah.
So basically,
surprised a lot of people.
Yes, so basically I'm showing 8 portraits from a project I did with Khalil West, who is a sex worker, and the exhibition was called I Am For You Can Enjoy, which is a song by I think it's New Order or one of those groups. Anyway, I'm so really it's kind of these black and white portraits of black men, queer men who sell erotic labour, and part of the work is about creating a different kind of conversation around pleasure, and then how actually I'm certain forms of pleasure, I think, within black and queer communities are kind of like marginalised and policed as well. And basically I would then argue that while some of us might be out around our sexual identity, we're marginalised around our sexual practice, even within quote unquote queer spaces. And so really some of the portraits is there to kind of and try and raise issues, but then to also try and challenge the whole notion around sex work. People have been coerced and so on and so forth, and so these are very head-on, straightforward portraits of very confident looking kind of black men, and then basically it then doesn't do that move around sex work that I find problematic.
Great, thank you. Great.
So then I would then show these 8 portraits.
On top of the speakers.
Top of the speakers,
Yeah.
yes.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm first year practice-based, and my project is trying to articulate the completely hidden domestic violence that is child parent violence, and which doesn't seem to exist anywhere in art whatsoever. I'm looking at it through the phenomenology of the home, so sort of everyday action and everydayness, and repetitions. I'm framing it as within these walls the maternal unheimlich, so looking at it as unheimlich rather than uncanny, specifically unhomely, and trying to kind of pair that with the mother thinking of the child as becoming monstrous.
Okay, thanks.
Or did you want to know what I'm doing for the
Yeah.
popcorn?
Well, yeah, that's right. Of course, you knew
Forgot about
this.
that. So not realising I'll be doing anything with popcorn. So the last performance I did was I did an apple pie marathon a few years ago where I made 26.2 apple pies, trying to make them quicker than I can run 26.2 miles, which I really can't because it took me 7 hours and I can't remember how many minutes. But anyway, so I thought I'd cook bags of popcorn, so from 1 piece of popcorn up to 26 and then a 0.2 popcorn, and see how long that takes, and try if I can get the equipment to record the violent noises of the popping and try to transmit that as well.
It'll smell great.
Yeah.
Is anybody bringing cotton candy? I forgot about that. We're not doing the cotton candy. Okay. The popcorn will be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
I'm Elena, and I'm doing my PhD within moving image fine art, and I work with moving image and text and installation, and I'm particularly interested in how architecture or design, if that's physical or non-physical, kind of frames how we negotiate public and private space. And I'm working on a body of research that looks at the kind of complex and changing landscape of public health and the kind of the social migration away from something like a group mindset to something that's more egocentric and user-focused and technology-infused. And I'm particularly interested in sort of wearable products or assistive technology, or how architectural environments might frame or might manifest kind of socio-ideologies or governmental policy. So I've been looking at a group of archives, particularly the Peckham experiment, which kind of talk about kind of early forms of sort of health and social observation in the 1920s, 1930s, before the foundation of the welfare state or the NHS, where kind of many relied on their healthcare from church and charity. And I've been using that as a way to think about our relationship to health and well-being now, and the kind of unhinging of ideas of common goods, and how that's both formed in the tools that we use or extend ourselves with, but also in the language that kind of frames those interactions. And I've got a show at the moment at South London Gallery where I've been focusing particularly on the Peckham experiment, and kind of unfurling that archive with the Wellcome Trust and read the collection where that archive kind of lives, but also in the physicality of the building, working with residents who live there now, some of who are architectural surveyors, so I've been working with LiDAR techniques to scan and work with the building, but also with MRI scanning techniques, because I've been working in with Cambridge and Oxford University and their kind of contemporary medical research. And when we're doing a book, hopefully, it was with Black Dog, but there's been some issues with Owen Hafley and Nina Wakeford and Felicity Thomas and Paul Fletcher, who are some of the scientists and researchers that I've been working with. And then what I'm doing for the Entanglement, it's based on something that I did at Art and Technology earlier this year, where I was thinking about what a good body was, or if there were good bodies, what are disobedient bodies. So I worked with a stenographer to act as a kind of mediator of a conversation that I was having with the Institute of Emerging Ethical Technologies, the Future of Humanities Institute, a research group at Microsoft, Tor Vision Lab, who are interested in using computer vision to create visual aids for blind people, and Shape Arts, who are a disability charity, and I was working with a set of activists from that group. And the conversation that's been mediated is exploring, I suppose, the language of adaptive or assistive technology, and whether the aim is to kind of whether the aim is to fix or create a solution for disability, or to normalise bodies, or whether the aim is to create something that offers more like a generative form of agency. So it's kind of thinking about transhumanism without giving that too much of a foreground space, because I wasn't interested in giving them a platform to speak what I find very, very problematic, but actually to put it in dialogue with that these particular people opposed, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
So yeah.
So there's a couple of people in the room right now we know that you can hook up with. That's quite good. Dorotto, I'm going to ask you to be very quick because you're an interloper here, but that's fine.
Yes, I'm working on, my name is Dorotto. Hopefully this year I will start my PhD research, working on affect concept from Deleuze and Spinoza on body.
And you're also a surgeon.
I'm an anesthetist, yes. Body on my own body. And whatever you said, yes, I'm there, yes. Hanging down, yes, on yogas, yes.
Stapling,
body,
okay.
Stapling, everything for you guys, you know, it's within me. We are
It's good to have you back, Dorotto.
I'm delighted. I'm just sneaked here.
I know. Emily.
I'm Emily. I paint, but I'm mostly looking at what it means for people to paint, physically paint, with such a kind of strong connection with using the internet all the time, and whether that's just in the use of maybe like blank space on web pages, or whether that's to do with the kind of absurd humor of internet images, or whether that's to do with the communities that are made around these things, or whatever. I'm showing 3 paintings tomorrow, so I'm trying to put down 3 paintings tomorrow, and I'm also doing some face painting, if anybody's interested, which I know. And I've made up some flash, because it's all going to be made up of like various internet memes, so if anybody fancies any of these.
That is hilarious. And are any of them going to be able to be not computable? Like, remember we were talking about the drone, the painting?
Oh, yeah. So me and Johnny were also talking this morning about, so it's called Dazzle. Like, it's basically like, you can use face paint to basically use it's black and white face paint, and you can cover sections of your face, and it basically means that facial recognition software, the pixels get confused, they can't tell whether there's a nose on your face or what's going on, so they can't spot you. So I might download some patterns for that if anybody knows of any CCTV cameras with facial recognition.
Liam Young, is it Liam Young? Who's just doing performances using Dazzle clothing, and also working with LiDAR technology. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I've seen a few people thinking about what Dazzle technology could mean in relation to fashion as well.
This magazine did a whole thing about using hair and makeup to confuse the.
I've seen that. Yeah. Like asymmetric fringes.
Always a good thing. The other thing is that Emily started off in her paintings. You do very large, enormous paintings actually, and they were all around tableau. What do you call it?
Tableau vivant.
Tableau vivant, and then you moved from that into the question of the meme as a tableau vivant, which you kind of left off in your explanation.
Yeah. I think it's kind of something. I mean, we've spoken before about how maybe when I first started, I was kind of finishing up a lot of work that I was doing for the MA. But now I think the tableau vivant idea will still probably play into this, but it's kind of more about communities that are set up. Maybe it's still about the gesture. Maybe it's about the kind of perversity of
taking your goat to freeze.
Oh yeah, I've got like an augmented reality app on my phone, and I took a goat to freeze to see
what it could see.
Yeah, so we could see Damien Hirst's dead sheep to see what he would think of it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Shannon, last but not least.
I'm Shannon. I'm a painter, and I'm thinking about kind of a constellation of ideas, but within specifically looking at bias and marginalization systems, and thinking about how the image is activated to propagate these things. And ultimately the idea is getting to kind of a reparative art, but I'm thinking also about what is the world made of in terms of between these places. And so thinking about science fiction, monsters, fiction, And specifically, categories of race, gender, and sexuality are the key areas.
So you've again come to the right place. See, think of that.
I think about this group.
That's right. Okay, thanks everybody. That's very good. We've only taken about an hour and a half to do this, but all good, all good. So let us now go into Foucault. So we're just going to shift gears now. You know that we were looking at Foucault and at Bataille, and last week I was very concerned because I was worried that people thought that only one or two people were dominating the conversation, and we can't have that. So I can either pick on people or you can volunteer. But I said I would give like a few-minute sort of cohesive remark that we can move into. And part of the seminar on entanglement is to get a sense of why. No, you can come in if you want. That's very kind. The thing is that I got those chairs, Martin, and I've been.
See, he doesn't want me to use the chair either.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. That chair, Martin, I don't know if you can hear me, but that chair is quite, unfortunately, not attractive to some people in this room.
Why?
Exactly.
Because I sat there.
No, not because you sat there. Don't think everything's about you. I get that, but no, it's actually because the chair was hideous. And it looks slightly better on eBay. I'd like to just say on behalf of myself.
At 4 o'clock in the morning.
Martin makes a face. They are pretty horrible. Okay, anyway, I'm asking people to paint them or do something to make them better, but maybe it's just not possible. So here's to give sort of an impetus for this term's way into these discussions. You know that you bring, one of the reasons we go around the room, the reason today was to introduce our visitors to each other and ourselves, but also we will always go around the room, except we'll be a little bit faster, because it allows you to remember what you're doing and to make it up on the spot and to change it on the spot, because it'll keep changing, and you shall please always think of whatever we do in terms of what you are personally working on. So that is secretly at the table or on the table, and it's a sort of King Arthur's notion of table. So it's a very big table, even though you're not literally at the table. You're all at the table. The idea behind the entanglement seminar, and the reason we're looking at entanglement mainly via philosophy. And by philosophy, it's a post-modernist approach, which is to say a break off from dialectical thinking, a break away from continuity, so we'll get back to that, a sort of plunge into nonlinearity and whatever all these words mean to get a sense of this, but at the same time to do this focusing on the playing field of sex, drugs, rock and roll. I think it's very important to always ask yourself, what is it about, or not to even ask yourself, but just to have a sense of what it is about the senses, the smells, orgasms, that has something to do with what we're doing here. And it's not just this cut and dry formulation of trying to get it right. There is no getting it right, and yet there is. So there isn't, and there is, and there is, and there is, and all the rest of this. And all of you around this room, we've had private conversations or whole conversations around what is art, and is it good art or bad art. These are all terrible ways of asking the question. But a lot of times, even though you might not want to ask the question, what is art, or what is good art, or is my work working, or any of this kind of stuff, at some level, you get annoyed when you see crap on the walls, or somewhere around, and it annoys you, and we want to talk about that. We want, whatever you want to call that, bad art, good art, blah, throwing up, I don't care what you call it, but whatever it's going to be called, it's a way in which I want you to start to articulate what makes it work, whatever that is. Now, the way into the seminar, 9 or 20 years ago, whenever we've all been starting, was to break away from dialectical reasoning, and what that was to say, so we're very clear on this, is that a dialectical approach involves the political question of what is right, which is why a lot of people who are not into dialectics who are artists say we cannot ask the question of what is good art or whatever, because to do that is to bring you back to metaphysics. And what is the problem with metaphysics? The problem with metaphysics is that it's based on a universal totality. And I'm not going to get into the whole discussion of what is a dialectic. We can have private tutorials about that. That's not what the seminar's about at the moment. We're going to go to the next, the alternative side. And one of the ways to look at the alternative side, or alternative sediments, or alternative intensity, whatever visualization you need, is that this seminar is based on what I would call the listening encounter. And last week you said you didn't think it was right that in my work, I wasn't having you read my work, so I put my work on now in the reading room, so you now read the work. And anyway, you should find it anyway on yourself.
It's on academia,
Thank you.
just so in case people haven't stopped that.
Anyway, the point is that in the most recent piece, which is not even out yet, but it's the one on friendship, which is the one I've been doing pretty much all over the world, it poses this thing called the listening encounter, which I have taken from Heidegger, and I've taken from Foucault, I've taken from Deleuze and Guattari, from Stengers, and from Einstein. And what it basically is about, and Bataille, and what it is basically about is to get away from the cogito, get away from rational approach, that something happens when there is a meeting of some kind, or what we'll call an encounter, and that encounter is best understood in terms of being attuned. And this attunement can happen with your body, it can happen with your ears, it can happen with your eyes, it can happen with your tongue, it can happen with your genitals, whatever, you're attuned. It's an encounter that finds its saying, or it finds its meaning in the way in which it enables a cohesion to happen. And I'm talking in these kind of very broad environments, but early on, people went to sound or music to try and get away from representation, because they're trying to talk about how, like, if you're listening, there's no edge. If I go ah, the edge of that ah sort of floats away. So it's a way of breaking those edges, breaking the frame, breaking this wholeness, and at the same time remaining with a thing called cohesive. Why? Because the cohesiveness enables an exchange to happen, a circulation to happen, an economy of sorts to happen. I shouldn't even say of sorts, an economy to happen. Why is an economy important? Because the movement and the way in which something is exchanged also creates meaning. So already we can be on a MOBA strip. You know, a MOBA strip is a one-dimensional environment. But that one-dimensional environment can mean that you can be on both sides at the same time, or no sides at any time. There's a shape-shifting that happens, but it's still involving an exchange. We can circle back to any of these things as we talk in the seminar. But this is just to give you some grounding. I'm doing a bit of at a gallop right now because we don't have a lot of time at the moment. But we've turned to Foucault and Bataille in this instance in order to satiate a certain hunger. The hunger, we can talk about it in terms of curiosity, we can talk about it in terms of just, I don't know, making an error and falling into it, you know, but the way it works is that the body itself is not a closed entity. And it's not body and mind split like this. As we know, we had last semester when we talked about the Cartesian doubt, to remind ourselves that doubt for Descartes was not about disagreeing or saying, no, I doubt what you say is true. That's not the doubt. The doubt, remember, forms a ground, which is to say that I can doubt that we're in reality right now. I can doubt that I have I'm looking at my two hands. I can doubt my eyesight is actually seeing my two hands, but I can't doubt doubt. I can't go back behind doubt, was the Cartesian move. Now, obviously, it turns out you can go behind doubt, but let's not go there at the moment. But I can't go behind doubt, says Descartes in the Meditations. Therefore, cogito ergo sum. The knowledge is what it is to be, but in fact, I doubt I think therefore I am is as it's usually translated, but it's actually I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. And people often conveniently leave this off in the Cartesian move. This is what Heidegger brings back in, this is what Foucault brings back in, this is what Donna Haraway brings back in, this is what I bring back in, this whole question of how the doubt operates. And that doubt itself is multidimensional, multiversal. And we're going to start using those terms a lot. So, this thing begins to open up what is this thing called the ground, which enables us to say that meaning is sticking, but it turns out you don't need a ground in the end. Again, a longer story, we don't have to go there now. But what Foucault does in these lectures, so this is sort of the generic moment. What Foucault does in these lectures is he says, well, if that's true, then what does it mean to have truth, really truth? Because, or you're seen to be a bit of a jerk, you know, holier than thou, you're too, you know, I don't know, too moral, this kind of thing. On the one hand, this thing I want to talk about the truth. Or you're, you know, repressed, or you're stuck in your ways because the truth tends to be mobile. It's, you know, so Foucault is saying we have to have the courage to remember that there's something that operates in a way that provides care, in a way that provides respect, and that these are important. These are not just, you know, well, they're important for, you know, liberal notions of what it is to be a human. He's throwing something out here, and he's got a problem on his hands because it's not clear cut how he's going to do it. And I'm just lay that's the first notch on the table. The second notch on the table that you have to think about is he's doing this in relationship to, on the one hand, the Cartesian, I think therefore I am, cogito ergo sum, or I doubt therefore I think therefore I am, and in relationship to the Kantian move on the Enlightenment, sapere aude, dare to know. I dare you to know. Well, who's the I that's daring who's the you to know? Sapere aude, I dare you to hear. I dare you to hear it. I dare you to become attuned. Because the argument was that change only happened via God, or the why question we've often talked about before. If you ask the why question, you'll you know, why do I have two hands? Well, because that's what the body does. Why do I have a body? Well, because that's what happened. Well, why is that what happened? Well, God. You know, in the end, you just, you know, you go back to the why question will always lead you back to God. So Foucault makes the argument you have to ask the that question, the how question, the when question, the where question, any of those other questions, but not the why question. All those other questions will lead you to why, but they'll lead you to a political why. And therefore you'll get closer to the truth. So the where question, the what question, the how question, the that question, the this question. It's really great being in philosophy because you make, you know, nouns out of adjectives and so on. You know. Love it. Anyway, sorry, side note. So what Descartes is doing and what Kant is doing, now remember, Kant is a racist, Descartes is not a, you know, he's sexist pig, they're all horrible, they all have something wrong with them, you know. But the advantage of looking at these people is that we don't have to invent the wheel. There are other wheels that have been invented that also need to be looked at, but we can steal from them. Just be careful of the Trojan horse problem. When you steal something, you might get an entire, you know, army that you didn't expect. Okay, they weren't stealing the Trojan horse, but you get the point. Learn how to be a good thief. Genet, Our Lady of the Flowers, Thief's Journal, any of those. Nope. Now, the point here is that the Kantian move that Foucault takes, that Foucault steals from Kant, is the exit. He's, you know, Kant is saying that the Enlightenment is about understanding change, putting change at the heart of the universe. Hegel gets in on the picture, they all get in on this picture, but what Foucault argues is in order to really understand change and to get out of the dialectical move, you have to ask yourself, how do you exit? you have to ask the how question of exiting. So you look at this room and you think, how am I gonna exit this room? Well, it's gonna be difficult this way. It could be this way, but that's gonna be hard too. It looks like it's cement. So probably we could all push and knock this over, or we could exit. Have in your mind how to exit. How do you exit a brutal situation? How do you find the exit? Well, the first part of that is to know that there is an exit. There can be an exit. Why would you think there's an exit if you're not thinking in dialectical terms, if you're not thinking in this notion of plurality? You think it's an exit not because there's a linearity, but because there's two things that are happening at the same time. That's the first position of dialectics. You have to begin to think in pluralities, but in dialectics you're only thinking in the contradictory plurality. So Foucault is suggesting that you have to think in the multiple or plural plurality, which is to say, stay with me here, that the notion of the discourse now, which forms this doubt or forms this pool or forms this ground, this discourse is itself multiple. And the multiplicity of that ground is established first in the Heideggerian move between being and Dasein, between little b being entity and big B being out there Dasein, in his being in time, and then later on in his identity and difference. And identity and difference is a far better work than being in time. In fact, he hates being in time. Always read as much about the philosophers that you look at as you can, because a lot of times, believe it or not, they change their minds, like you might as well. So you look at the early work, and you think, oh wow. You look at your early work and you think, that was really crap. Well, Heidegger probably would not say it's crap, because Heidegger would not say that about himself, but he did say it was wrong. Same thing with Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein's two works, that the only people that seem to read it, the Tractatus and the Philosophical Investigations, drives me mad. The only two books he said, well, the Tractatus he hated and tried to get it removed from publication. And the Philosophical Investigations he just thought was wrong. And those are the only two that usually get assigned in philosophy classes. So irritating. But part of it is that all the rest of them were written by his students. Don't hold back. Okay, but just saying, it would be very helpful. His Uncertainty, very important book. His Remarks on Mathematics, the 1939 lecture, is very important. His Culture and Value. And the reason they're important is because they begin to show how an entity and an out there connect. It's the encounter. Heidegger will call it a dwelling, but it's this attraction. You, as this entity, are pulled by the out there. Sounds very sci-fi, but you're pulled by the out there to go out there. And the out there is pulled by you to make something make sense. So you're making sense by grabbing the out there and taking it to yourself. And what is it? Heidegger calls that techna. The technology, the logic of techna, the technology, the logic of techna is to grab the out there and bring it to yourself at the same time while you're being grabbed and having this movement. And for Heidegger, that movement creates like this bridge, which he calls the discourse. And that is what Derrida, Foucault, the whole, Merleau-Ponty, Lyotard, that's the first attempt at thinking this word discourse. And the thing about Heidegger is that he said that these two entities that pull one way, pull the other way, and they create this thing, this energy field, let's say, between this pull. Because if you are swallowed up by the Dasein, or you swallow up the Dasein, then it's a oneness. There's nothing. You get that? You're just swallowed into it. So there has to be some way that you don't get completely swallowed into the out there, and the out there doesn't completely get swallowed into you, because if it does, nothing exists. And that's Heidegger's big attack on Hegel, his famous A equals A, which is always hilarious reading Heidegger, A equals A, it's like, oh my God, so A is drawn to A belongs to A, that equal sign that pulls it together makes the A's together and at the same time apart. And this is a very fundamental moment of identity. Identity for Heidegger is about belonging. A belongs to A just wants to be. I want to be alone, I want to belong. Alone, belong, alone, belong. And that double movement is what's inherent in a discursive move. Now, Heidegger argues that you can't get rid of those two endpoints, as it were. Because if you get rid of the endpoints, it all goes crazy. But not Einstein. Einstein argues exactly the reverse. What Einstein argues is, and not just Einstein, but we're doing the potted history of this. What Einstein argues is that it's precisely the equal sign, we're going to use the equal sign in our brain so you have something to visualize, that names the pulling together of the encounter. Because really what makes an encounter work, like in the dark room, what makes it actually work, this encounter, so that you are encountered like this, or encountered like this, or encountered with a genital, that encounter that makes it hold, makes it stick, doesn't require endpoints. It just requires this. And what does he call that? Relativity. E equals mc squared is the most famous one. The E is attracted, belongs to the mc squared. They belong together, but at the same time they're apart. So it's not that E, that's not that energy is indistinguishable from mc squared, mass times velocity squared. I don't know why c is velocity, but anyway. E equals mc squared. It is that the equal sign is like Samson holding the things up, the building as it's collapsing. That's what's holding up. And what does Lyotard call that? He calls the equal sign the great zero. Because, and now just stay with me on this. The great zero, or the I've never been able to say this word, the concentrated zero in libidinal economy is an economy. And what's its economy made from? It's made from E equals mc squared in this example. It's made from the belonging and the pulling apart. So that thing, which is alive and moving and has energy, well, it's literally energy, but anyway, it has a vitality to it, forms a zero. It just, in your mind, because you might be used to arithmetic, and therefore when you picture a zero, you picture it with borders, or you picture it as a nothing. This zero is a very odd zero. In fact, most societies, or many societies never had a zero in them. It's quite a recent thing. Zeros are very odd animals, because zeros don't mean nothing. Zeros mean something very odd. It's an infinite oddness. Now, I give you this background because this, and we'll keep returning to it. We'll keep returning to it until you get it. Because you just need to hear this again and again. But this weird compression, as it were, and then at the same time, belonging, not belonging, belonging, not belonging, belonging, not belonging. This thing that happens, which in the Einsteinian move creates the moment where one can start to think pluralism, or not pluralism as in the political move, but pluralism in the physics move. That notion of pluralism is precisely the zero. It's the nth form of dimension. Okay, looks like weird faces here. Okay, the reason I'm saying all of this, and again we'll circle back to it. So just think of zero as not being something that's empty. Okay, we'll try it that way. Don't think of zero as an empty container. Don't think of zero as a container at all. Think of zero as, I'm going to use the word negative, but I don't mean it as against. Think of it, I mean it more like a negative of a photograph. Think of a negative, think of zero as something that enables the is to take place, literally to take place, to make a place happen, make place happen. But it has all these different things going on in it. If you can get that tiny thing, which is very complex to get, and this is where Deleuze and Guattari go running with it with, with the Capitalism Schizophrenia book and their Thousand Plateaus, which is volume 2. What they do with this is that in regular arithmetic, let's just call it regular arithmetic, or liberalism, better way of putting it. In classical liberal theory, the 1 is like an individual, and the 0 is not an individual, it's a nothing. And in early computing, 0s and 1s created programs. But in the move that Einstein is, where I'm suggesting Einstein's suggesting, because it's obviously there's a huge amount of discussion on this, and Niels Bohr, and more particularly, that Karen Barad speaks of, and so on. In the 0 and 1 that they're talking about, the 0 is the 0 I just described. It's not an empty 0, it's not a not 1. And the 1 isn't a something, the 1 is a segment. So the 1 is like a fractal. And you remember that a fractal is not part of a pie. It's a slice that has no edges to it. It's just a slice. Like that, has no edges, but it takes a form. So the segment and the 0, and for Deleuze and Guattari, the 0 becomes a plane of eminence, and the segment becomes the chorus, or whatever. And if you combine those two things together, you will get a very complex notion of discourse. What Foucault does with this, okay, you still with me here? Okay, what Foucault does with this, he says this is how one actually begins to understand this thing called truth. But you don't have to go through this long journey studying philosophy to do it. You have to, quote, simply understand what it is to be a cynic in the old sense of the word cynic, not the new sense. Not the, I'm at the RCA, why aren't they giving me things? Sorry. That's me being a cynic. Yeah. A cynic meaning that there is the there's the attraction, as it were, the belonging, and then the non-belonging to say what is. Now remember that the is not a position. The is the discourse. So the cynic is saying what is, but the is not like the truth, meaning by the truth, I'm right, you're wrong, although it does often mean that. It's this thing that is established, so deep time can come into this in a very, anyway. So what Foucault starts out in lecture 1, when he, in the 2 lectures, and I don't know, did anybody read the introduction to the lectures, or did you just read the 2 lectures?
2 lectures.
At least you're honest, I mean, those are good. But in the introduction, it talks about how Foucault was really pissed off that he wasn't allowed to have a seminar like this, that because he was a professor, he had to give these big lectures, and he hated them.
You wanted a seminar.
He wanted a little seminar, like this kind of thing. They didn't have technology, so you couldn't do this, and this is the seminar, and everybody else can listen in. So he got really annoyed, and some of the times he would do his seminar, he would just talk bullshit, and it's fantastic, and I don't know if anybody else has ever done this that wants to admit it. There was a time when I was a bad person, teaching undergraduates, and just to see whether or not if they were listening, I would just say something completely insane, and just see if they wrote it down. And
how'd you spell that?
And it was just incredible, And I tell people, just listen. Don't need to, write everything down. Just listen. And they just anyway. So I used to come up with whole stories, Anyway. And then they show up on the exams. I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. Now I have to mark it. Okay, so that's the next problem. And it's like double hatred to myself.
I was going to say, there's an opposite problem now, because now they don't write down anything.
Don't write down anything, just take photographs.
They just wait for things to get absorbed somehow.
Yeah, I've left the undergraduate world. Yeah. I used to write down things to such an extent that when I was working for the State Department, which is another whole story, but when I was working for the State Department, I started taking notes in a meeting that Admiral Zumwalt, who at that point was head of the CIA, was speaking about something, and someone came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, but you are taking notes." It's like, you just ruined my attention span. I know I'm taking notes. Like, yes, thank you. And I went back taking notes, and they came back and they, "Excuse me, but you're taking notes." And it's like, okay, and you're an idiot. What can we do? I'm taking notes. You're an idiot. Okay, fine. And I was also in the front row, which didn't help. And then these two thugs came and picked me up and carried me out. I was like, what the hell? What's wrong with you people? And they wanted to know if I was a spy. Because why else would you be taking notes? Anyway, that's called a binary, based on a totalized field of vision. You're either in it or you're against it. Okay. What Foucault does is he tries to build the notion of poresia, which is the notion of how the things stick. That's what the truth is. The truth is the way in which something sticks. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean you should agree with it. Racism sticks, for example. How come? Misogyny sticks. Why? If I hear one more time that Harry Weinstein, or whatever his name is, has done something wrong, and to this thing called the women in the group, it's like this amorphous mass of vaginas, and then there's Harvey Weinstein, it's just like, why is this man getting any airtime? Why don't we just, I don't know, kill him? Or I don't know, hold him up by his thumbs, or put him upside down. I don't know, at this point I'm like giving up on him. He's like so uninteresting. And why don't we just listen to what could make things better? But okay, maybe that's just me being me. Yes, I feel the same way.
They're working on that.
They are working on that.
They're working on
Setup of him.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
With that
that's right.
sound.
Anyway, sorry, went off on a tangent.
They're massaging Harvey now.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Thank you. What was that time when Claire was in the seminar, and everyone was becoming a vagina or something like that? Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
And you announced that you were becoming a vagina.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Your vagina?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were you not there in that?
I was.
Yeah, you were there. Okay. Anyway, sorry, that was another tangent. Okay. Who would like to now make a comment on either Bataille's inroad to this, now that you have a sense of the bigger or the tinier picture, or your reading of Diogenes, or Foucault's take on Diogenes' view of the way in which this moment happens, either by looking at the actual work, which I think would really be great, or by, if you're nervous still about that, you bring your own work into it. Now, I'd like to mention somebody who's not spoken before, Barnaby.
No.
Okay, Emily, oh my God, that's fantastic.
It was just a really basic thing. I'm
Can the
reading
camera
this.
pick this up? Can the microphone pick up Emily?
Emily, would you like to?
Okay, all right, that's right. Sorry.
It's only really short. I'm reading this book called Wasting Time on the Internet by Kenneth
Called what?
We need to hear this.
So I'm reading a book called Wasting Time on the Internet by Kenneth Goldsmith.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm kind of about. That was one of these. It's just that he does mention Paresia.
Yeah.
Paresia.
Paresia. In it. I just wanted to read it out because from what I got so far, this is not right.
Okay.
But I don't know. So it's only short. He says about it. All of this.
Wait, what page is that on?
It's page 113.
And what's the publishing date?
I think it's about 2016.
Okay.
So he says, all of this is a far cry from the activism of Aaron Swartz, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden, where theoretical propositions are not an option. These four individuals enacted Michel Foucault's notion of padesia, the impulse to speak the truth at whatever cost, and they paid dearly for it, Manning in prison, Snowden in exile, Assange in limbo, and Swartz with his life. And it's here where the distinctions between activism and art, politics and poetry, fact and fiction become clear. I'm reminded of Ludwig Wittgenstein's admonition, do not forget that a poem, although it is composed in the language of information, it is not used in the language game of giving information, such as the freedom and beauty of poetry. Politics, however, is another matter. And I just got the feeling that reading that, it's making the kinds of maybe divisions and I don't know, talking something about you kind of get the feeling that art cannot have like a truth to it in the way that he's talking about it.
Okay, good. Throw that on the table. I think that's great because the thing about Chelsea Manning, Snowden, all of them, there is something about that has the Parisic move going on. But you're right that that's the incorrect reading of it, though you could say that they're all being Parisic. Can anybody explain the difference? Because you were sending me stuff on this. Can you?
What I understood from what you read is that, and what also Socrates says in the text, is that parrhesia cannot be exercised in the political arena or in religious institutions, because in this kind of dispositif, let's say, it is impossible to be a Parrhesiast. This is what I understood.
But yes, and why? But you see, on the one hand, Foucault is very political. You know, he is saying it. You know, we die to speak about gay rights or whatever the thing is. Although, to be honest, to be fair, when I was working with Foucault directly, and we set up the first, I think I mentioned this before, we set up the first gay march in Toronto and begged him to go on it. And he was like, no, I don't believe in identity politics. And I was like, I hate this, Anyway, we finally convinced him. There was like 15 people on this march, which included the police and the hot dog sellers and like 5 lesbians, Foucault, and a couple of gay men, drag queens. I mean, that was it. And he loved it. It was a great time. But...
Ooh, a seminar.
Sorry. Very funny. Anyway, so the question becomes, what does it mean to speak the truth, to die for the truth, if it doesn't mean precisely what Emily has set up, because Socrates, for example, takes the hemlock because he dies for the truth, as it were. And he is meant to pay a cock he says to Crito to pay the cock to Asclepius, which is the healer.
The god of medicine.
Yeah, the god of medicine. And you only pay the bird, the cock, the rooster, not just a cock, but the bird to Asclepius because he's done something for the community. And therefore you're paying back something. And there's, over thousands of years, there's been an argument of what did this mean? Did Socrates mean that he was really glad to die? Did it mean that thank you to Asclepius for coming up with, hemlock? I mean, what did any of this mean? I, of course, made an analysis of it, but and it was based on this lecture on Foucault, because the question becomes, what is it that forms the basis of truth? It's the same question of what is it that forms the basis of art, and it's the same thing around this question of doubt. So when you think about this, don't think of a hard ground, don't think of a line, don't think of a motto.
Johnny.
Yeah.
The truth is, I've got to leave.
Why?
I don't want to. It's really interesting. Nice to meet you all. Brief though it is.
Nice to meet
you. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
Okay.
You're not going to miss your train, are you?
No, I'll be fine.
Okay. Anyway, Martin now comes in. Changing of the guard here. Okay. So, anyone want to give another stab? Let's open.
What about this one section?
Okay, what page?
11.
Okay.
First paragraph, kind of the middle of the first paragraph, starting with...
It's the one off of the reading room, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
For there to be...
Did you say page 11?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. you recall I stressed this last year, the subject must be taking some kind of risk, parentheses, in speaking. This truth which he signs as his opinion, his thought, his belief, a risk, which concerns his relationship with the person to whom he is speaking.
So just go to the next sentence.
Yeah, and I underline that too. For there to be Parisia, in speaking the truth, one must open up, establish, and confront the risk of offending the other person, of irritating him, of making him angry and provoking him to conduct what may even be extremely violent.
So it sounds very much exactly what your author, who was it again?
Kenneth Goldsmith.
Kenneth Goldsmith. Sounds exactly what Kenneth. No.
But I'm wondering, the difference to me that I'm hearing here versus the
There.
cute kitten picture book, which she has.
I like that. Very good. Evil smile.
Did you see the kitten picture book? She gives those to me all the time. That's the way she always looks at it. Can you show them the kitten picture? Just so they know I'm not crazy.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
It is a bit odd.
Is that it's a relationship and it's a person instead of it's the person who is telling the truth on a person basis, on the individual basis, on their basis, to a person. And it's somehow the threat is based on the relationship of these people versus this political context of the many.
Excellent. Can you say it again so everybody can hear it?
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Be afraid.
So the difference to me is that in this kitten book, the relationship
Wait,
is...
can you refer to it as the actual book?
I don't know. I have no idea what it is. What is
Wasting time on the internet.
Wasting time on the internet, yeah.
Okay.
So I've never heard of the book, I just like
That's
the
right,
picture.
but we need to be professional on some minimal level. Yeah, okay.
Is that in that book, it's the kind of political social construction, where it's the many, and it's not the personal, it's specifically not the personal, it's en masse, it's the political, it's the machine.
Oh wait, no, wait, you now said the reverse of what you just said.
What? That's what that book.
Oh, no.
Whereas in the Foucault, it's about the relationship of the person's truth, and the relationship between that person telling the truth and another person. So it's a much more... No.
It's reversed. I heard it wrong. Take another step. Take another stab at it. Anyone take another step. So you have two options on the table. Okay? Option A, that Parisia is, I'm sorry I'm saying it wrong, it's just going to have to happen. That Parisia,
Parisia.
See, it's not happening for me.
Parisia.
Parisia. Is option A, that you have these two entities who encounter each other, and one is saying the personal issues that they have about someone else's personal issues, and they are just being honest. They're just saying, look, I'm just being honest. This is, so I am, a whistleblower, and I'm doing this up front, and I'm trying to clarify this. I personally will be doing this because I personally think this has to happen in a very specific way, versus someone who whistleblows because it has to happen, not because the person feels that they must be the one that does it.
Mm-hmm.
So option A, in case we're not being clear here, option A is one is being personally on the front line because they're into finding the truth, like a mercenary, into fighting because that's what you like to do. You like to fight. I mean in the military, let's say, so think of mercenary.
So it's kind of a professionalization.
The
Which is
professionalization.
where the modes start to get mixed towards
Yes.
the end of it.
So the professionalization of the move versus the move, no matter what is the scenario. So it's not untrue what he's saying about Chelsea Manning and the rest of them. That is okay. But because it's in an environment that, because of the political, religious connotations, it can easily be subsumed into a professionalization. Does it make sense? Can
Yes.
you clarify that some more, Francis?
I don't know if I can clarify it, but I think, yeah, the difference is exactly that. Also the idea of how I see it as something that involves a pact between people, and there may be ways of saying that what the whistleblower in those whistleblowers, you know, or people in that sense, may feel that they have a pact between themselves and various others to whom they make that information available. I mean, there's probably different ways you could look at each of them and
Yeah.
think about that, because they're all actually, that's the other thing I find a bit problematic about that quote, they're all quite different, right? They're not all the same. I don't see Julian Assange and Aaron Swartz as the same, right? And I think Kenneth Goldsmith is, well, let's not go there, but...
No, let's go there.
Well, no, I feel like you have to look at his agenda in kind of his own agenda about information, freedom of information, his own work.
Which is what?
He set up UbiWeb. He's a poet.
That's dubious ethics.
He has some dubious. I guess he's quite a contentious figure when it comes to things like authorship, copyright, ownership of art, and those kinds of things. So obviously there is a kind of. I mean, I haven't read the book, right? But I imagine he has a kind of championing, roughly, broadly speaking, of those kinds of figures because they are engaged in the same kind of quote-unquote mission that he might himself see that he's doing, which is to bring information, to share information, but also with him as the kind of starting point of that information. And as I understand it, reading Foucault, is that the idea of the pact, or even the game, which I think is actually a really interesting word.
Yeah, it's good.
Game kind of brings me up a bit short. I'm like, pact, I get it, truth, pact, great. But game, a game's about truth. I mean, I don't know, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's something that maybe in translation is...
But no, the games of truth is a very specific thing, because it's almost like a chess game, let's say.
Right.
In a chess game, or in chess, which is a game, to use chess as an example, the game does not involve jealousy, for example, does not involve trust, does not involve a lot of things that maybe a pact might imply.
Yeah.
But still, there is a cohesion that happens. And still there is an understanding that happens, and there's an exhilaration that can happen, and there's an acceleration that can happen, and there's a deceleration that can happen, all in this thing called chess. I often say to people, if you want to survive academia, or in fact any work, any professional environment, you need only two things, and I got this from my father, he used to tell me this. You need to learn how to play chess, and you need to know how to box, and you'll be fine. It's very important, because if you start thinking that it's really about trust, not trust, or often it's just a strategic scenario that's going on. Now one doesn't like to think that, because one likes to think of the university, for example, enables curiosity and all the good things that we're about, you know, knowledge, but notice we have to be in this environment, almost in a bunker, to be having a proper discussion about anything that could go against whatever the norm is these days, including radical norms that become embedded into the institution under some name. So it's very complicated. So, you know, you can, like, I think that what happens in a community and radical empathy and so on, you do get trust. You do have these things, love, comradeship, pitié in the empathetic way, all this care, this kind of thing, all these things. But that's not part of the game. The game, which doesn't mean it has to be bloodthirsty, It just means that there is a game, and you need to know what those rules are. Just like if you stand in front of a tank while it's coming down the road, and you're going like this, very likely you'll get run over. Now, maybe the person will see you and not run you over. But as we all know from that very famous image, the person got run over, and that was part of the game. This is not excusing it. It's not only is it part of the game, but it's part of what makes that now so powerful that the person or persons who ran this person over, or certainly the governments, have to deal with that. So not that it didn't have any impact.
You talking about the Tiananmen Square image? The person stopping the tank then was run over by the tank. I did not know that.
I thought he was dealt with some other way. I didn't think he was run over.
Yeah, I thought he successfully stopped the column of tanks. I don't know. That was the impression I was under. But
I thought he was run over.
In Greece, it happened though in the dictatorship
Yeah.
that a tank killed.
Yeah.
When they entered the Polytechnic.
And that is the question, like, if we were to stand up and say, you know, we have issues about something, and we stand up and take a position, you might very well get run over, or you might be listened to, but it's not arbitrary. There's things that happen that create the power grid, like that make the crossing of that line possible or not possible, depending on what that is. Sometimes you can put your hand up and the entities will not cross it. Sometimes you put your hand up and it doesn't run over. When does it, which one works? And you'll never find the answer if your analysis is in a linear logic. You'll never understand how the power works, how truth works, how friendship works, how love works, none of it. You have to figure out how the cohesion is established. So the Parisiac, let's circle back to this Parisiac again. Let's start again with what you were saying.
Yeah, so, sure. I think what was interesting here as well was that there is a role given to the person who is spoken to. And it's not then developed that then that person speaks the truth back. I mean, I don't think it's quite as neatly reciprocal as that. But there is the idea of both parties being equally involved on some level. I find that really
kind of equally culpable.
Equally culpable. They generate, like, in order for it to, you know, for the truth to be told, the telly, can you have a teller or a telly, the person who's being told, they're not just being told, they are actually, they have to respond, whatever that response is, whether that response is like, okay, thanks for telling me, or the response is anger or violence. You know, the response is part of the process. I suppose I'm kind of seeing it as an idea around process.
But be careful about the word process. You're right about process. But process tends to envision process as a line, or going in this direction, or even going in that direction. But process is more like.
So maybe participation is a better word.
Encounter.
Yeah, I mean I like encounter it also.
Because you're talking about this cohesion. This is the thing. And so if we go back to E equals MC squared, the MC squared isn't going, shall I approach the E or shall I not approach the E? It's approached. The E doesn't go, I'm going to explain something to you, MC squared. When you realize what this is all about, you're going to realize you're about energy, right? It just comes together. So that's step one. The Parisiac is doing something in this move. Anybody else want to take a stab at it?
Sorry, I wonder if there's a risk of being intelligibility, being unintelligible, and therefore maybe sending it out. It causes a destruction or some sort of bad reaction, so it endangers yourself, your existence, because you're...
Yes, exactly right. In a certain sense, I mean, I hate to sound like this because this is going to sound really corny, and I don't mean it in a corn sense, okay? But if you really get your PhD done properly, in a certain sense, this is not to make you weep and cry and gnash your teeth, because sometimes you just have to get it done. Okay, frenzy. there's a Prejec moment where by the time you start finishing your PhD, it has to come out. I mean, I don't mean you have to just get it done. There's that side to it, but this thing has to be said. That's the Prejec moment. Yeah.
I've just got some issues with the truth and whose truth it is, and it could be multiple people affected. So, for example, if you had a child in a family and there's a violent situation, the child might tell the truth, and it might be a truth that encompasses the whole family. And the effect that I mean, for one thing, they might not be coming at it from a point of courage, it might be a point of desperation, or it might be a point of stupidity in the fact that they think something will happen and something else will happen. It depends who they tell, it depends where it is, all sorts of things are different, and it's not just a simple question of that cohesion.
So what does it mean to say courage? Can anybody think of anything they've done recently that you would think to yourself that was courageous, that you yourself have done?
When I did do the jury service, we
So
all
you
had
did
to-
a jury service, people didn't know that part.
We all have to give the affirmation, and like, so you give them a card and you can read out the religious, whatever religious affirmation or the non-religious affirmation. So you know how like I'm not very good at speaking to groups. I suddenly had to read out this affirmation of that I solemnly affirm. I can't remember the thing, but affirm truth.
That was really fantastic.
And I was like kind of like I found I was like quite scared actually. I felt like really fearful. I felt almost in tears saying it, and it came out really weird.
And that was Prejec.
I don't know. It's sort of like there was certainly a moment. It sort of started cared about what I was sort of saying. That it was I don't know. It was sort of just well, it seemed like a relevant thing to say in response to what you were.
Are you saying that you got through your fear and did it anyway, and that was the courage? Even though
Oh,
it was...
okay. We were talking about courage, weren't we? So I suppose it was. I suppose I felt vulnerable in that moment. So, like, when you are being called upon to be courageous in a way, I suppose, because you're scared. Well, I suppose I was scared. What if I was being called upon to make a decision, like so. What if I made the wrong decision? Like, it's really important that I tried to make the right decision. so it's even like.
So was the courage about speaking, or about the fact that you were going to be on the jury that was going to make a decision, or kind of the one leading to the other, kind of both?
Well, I suppose in that, like, in that particular moment, having to say to the court that it's apparent what you're sort of feeling. So obviously everybody was there. As a jury, you know you're being called upon to sort of make a decision, but in that moment you actually have to sort of say to everybody as well, so you sort of expose yourself even more, kind of.
So courage is exposure then?
Well, I actually think the word that I've been thinking about while I've been speaking is, to me it's more about, not about sort of owning something in this decision. It's more like not being a subject, sort of like possessing my action, but knowing that my actions are going to be contributing to a decisiveness that happens, and that's the moment of truth, and wanting to sort of play into that in a good way, rather than sort of so that's what I was thinking.
Anya, what were you going to say? Were you going to say something?
No, I'm just thinking.
Okay. Anybody going to say something?
I was going to say something. Because I was thinking a lot about the photograph actually, and I was really, maybe it's a bit obvious. Because Foucault also writes about sort of like two ways of looking at parousia.
Parousia. Oh my God, truth. Parousia.
Going back to like risk as well. He's talking about risk.
Yeah.
It's always involves part of risk. And on page 9.
Okay, good.
So just a sentence just above the last paragraph. The parahesiast is the person who tells all.
The last line.
You need to pinpoint.
Just sentence just before the last paragraph.
Oh, oh yeah, right. Okay, sorry.
And then so what I'm looking at here is like when he starts talking about the index. So you're jumping down to the last sentence and that.
I tell you what, can you read from now having recalled to the word.
So can you tell me where you are?
I'm on the first main sentence on that page. I would like to mention briefly some of the essential elements which characterizes
the paragraph that begins with and ends with the sentence you just quoted. The beginning of the paragraph that ends with the sentence.
You recall that. You recall that etymologically, parisia.
No, the one before that, paragraph before that.
Now, having recalled this general trajectory, I would like to mention briefly some of the essential elements which characterize parisia and their parasitiatic role. Very briefly, for a few minutes, and once again, for the benefit of those who are not here, I should go back over some things I have already said. I apologize to those who will be hearing this again. And then I would like, as quickly as possible, to move on to another way of envisaging the same notion of parousia. You recall that etymologically, parousia is the activity that consists in saying everything, panrima. Thank you. It's telling all. The parasiasthesis is the person who says everything. Thus, as an example, in his discourse on the embassy, the master says it is necessary to speak with parousia without holding back at anything, without concealing anything. Similarly, in his first Philippic, he takes up exactly the same term and says, I will tell you what I think without concealing anything. The parasiasist is the person who tells all.
Keep going. Because that's not the one he's talking about. That's the type he's not.
But we should immediately add the clarification. I just need my glasses.
Aha!
Blurry. But we should immediately add the clarification that this word parisia may be employed without two values. I think we find it used in a pejorative sense, first in Aristophanes and afterwards very commonly even in Christian literature. Used in a pejorative sense, parisia does indeed consist in saying everything, but in the sense of saying anything. Anything that comes to mind, anything that serves the cause one is defending, anything that serves the passion or interest driving the person who's speaking.
And can you think of anyone in recent days that could fill this with a T?
Possibility. Quite possible, yeah.
Tea time.
Yes.
The parasiast then becomes and appear as the impenitent chatterbox, someone who cannot restrain himself, or at any rate, someone who cannot index link his discourse to a principle of rationality and truth. There is an example of this use in the term parousia in a pejorative sense, saying everything, saying anything, saying whatever comes to mind without reference to any principle of reason or truth. In Isocrates, in the discourse entitled Buceris, in which Socrates says that, unlike the poets, who ascribe everything and anything, absolutely everything and any qualities and the defects to the gods, one should not say everything about them. Similarly, in the book 8th of the Republic, I'll give you the exact after the text. There is the description of the bad democratic city, which is all motley, fragmented and dispersed between different interests, passions and individuals who do not agree with each other. This bad democratic city practices parrhesia. Anyone can say anything. But the word parrhesia is also employed in a positive sense, and then parrhesia consists in telling the truth without concealment, reserve, empty manner of speech, or rhetorical ornament, which might encode or hide it. Telling all is then telling the truth without hiding any part of it, without hiding it behind anything. In the second fillet, Demosthenes says that unlike bad parrhesiaists who say anything and do not index their discourses to reason, he, Demosthenes, does not want to speak without reason. He does not want to resort to insults and exchange blow for blow. You know those infamous disputes in which anything is said so long as it may be harm adversary and be useful to one's own cause. He does not want to do this, but rather he wants to tell the truth. Ta aletheia, things that are true. With parrhesia, metaparrhesias, moreover he adds, I will conceal nothing. To hide nothing and say what is true is to practice parrhesia. Parrhesia is therefore telling all, but tied to the truth. Telling the whole truth, hiding nothing of the truth. Telling the truth without hiding it behind anything.
Okay, so does that, if you skip down to the next page, where he says, and yet we will not call this parrhesia. Okay, so even though he's just now detailed this is called parrhesia, he's now saying even that isn't the kind that he's talking about, isn't the kind that Sophie just asked about, right? This is not the kind, or it's not the kind you were meaning to ask about, because you asked the question, is it courageous if a young child or a child runs out saying whatever and it's true, quote, from their perspective, which doesn't necessarily mean it's true, it just means, because if one adds from one's perspective, it implies that depending on where you're standing to look at the elephant, it can be a leg, a table, you know, the old saying, it could be whatever, is that true, is it not true, and that's not true. So he's saying that it's not in one's opinion, because truth isn't about one's opinion. And this is key. Truth is about that which emerges because it can't be otherwise. That's what is the truth.
Does that mean that this parrhesia exists in the space in between? That it's actually, I keep finding myself wanting to talk about the void, or what you just told about the concurrence of this, the relationship, that it's not about this, these are the borders, or these are the ones that jump into that space, but that all of this takes place in that space. And
yes and no, because it would be an in-between if there were an in-between. But an is not the in-between of the future and the past. The is only the in-between of the future and the past if one has a linear sense of time, as progress, let's say. That's why I wanted to get people to not talk about the word process in that way. You can talk about process, but you have to then think of it not in that way. So in fact, the so-called in-between, as you mean it, is in fact this thing called the is. This is why Einstein is so critical here, and is so important here, because Einstein doesn't require borders to set up the is. The equal sign just gathers, and that which it gathers is the is. So there's an intensity,
right,
and it's the intensity is not in between two things, it just is the intensity. Yeah?
Yeah, it's something, because I didn't have I'll try to find the picture I was thinking of, because when I said borders, I was thinking, my image was of a circle, it wasn't a linear, it was...
No, but that's still, it could be a circle, it could be a square, it could be a dot, it could be a line. They're all the same image, if you're thinking in terms of borders. There is, see, this is the tough part, it means trying to think without putting a border up. It is quote, just the is. So in fact, if this were a flat piece of paper, the is, and this was the future, and this was the past, and the is in the center, let's say. In fact, if you did it this way, then you would see that the is could be the collapse of the future and the present. So it just depends on the way in which one gets outside, or gets away from, not outside of, but gets away from this linear move of a chronos, a chronology, or dialectics, which still has a in-between, has an excluded middle. And that's what's trying to be said here. Whether or not it is working is another thing altogether.
But isn't he saying that it's the act of truth, that it has to exist some, what's important is the relationship between what is being said and the thinking of the person who's saying it.
Yes.
And then also there's, so that has to happen, there has to be like some relationship there, but also that tension there is the truth.
Yes. So now we have at least two types of truth on the table, and they're both true. One type of truth is the truth that is this instrumental truth. 1 + 1 is 2. That's the truth. Of course, it depends if you're not in base 10, then 1 + 1 is not 2. But anyway, but if you're in base 10 or whatever, 1 + 1 is 2. Period. That's one type of truth. The other type of truth is the truth that emerges because of the way in which the cohesion happens and can't happen any other way. That's also the truth. And that's our second truth. But there's another truth that's happening. The one that implies, or not implies, but enables the senses. And by the senses, we're going to include here love, fear, anger. And so the question is, does one have the courage of that kind of truth, the kind of truth that enables the senses to be? And the answer is pretty much not really, because it's tough to do that. Because usually when that happens, one is, or one can be harmed. I don't mean if I were saying to you, you know, we have a terrible relationship and, you know, it's because you're an idiot, you know, and that's the truth, that's how I really see it. You know, that's like a kind of typical, you know, lover's quarrel kind of thing that the person says, you know, well, I'm just telling you as it is. You know, I'm just telling you that's not the thing that's being said here. It's this thing that enables a kind of gentleness, that the cohesion happens because it can. And because it can, the question is, must it? That's, you know, between can and must, big gulf. Racism happens because it can. Must it happen? Violence happens because it can. That's a truth. Must it happen? That's a different one. Sylvia, how are you doing with this? Is it making sense, or is it?
I thought I had it and now I've completely lost it.
Welcome to the seminar. Welcome to the seminar. Yeah. Anna, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just I think probably what you mentioned, like first the question knowledge,
Louder.
it's reference to teaching type modality of truth telling.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the other one about actually saying something like that, video or something, just categorizing in a way, but probably I can refer somehow to prophetic when you're telling people something about their like nature, but I mean not specifically because it's like prophetic here, more like.
Yeah, it's not quite. I mean, it could be prophetic. It could be like you're actually doing a prophecy, but it's not quite there like that. Or are you saying that? Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I was saying that it's not.
It's not that, yeah,
because
yeah,
it's also
yeah.
about a future, like it's different, and I try to actually define prophetic for me in a contemporary context, like that's a different thing.
I mean, the one question is, I mean, most of us, if not all of us in this room at least, are quite political. And the political nature of what it is not, it's not like one is on the left and the other's on the right, is that the left is correct. It's a different, it's like, when do you know that what you're knowing is correct? Like for example, let's take a racist who really believes that it's proper and right, or misogynist, to use that, proper and right to be a misogynist, versus people that think that it's not proper and right to be a misogynist. So who's right? I mean, it's an old argument. I mean, Socrates, way back when well, Plato wrote about it in the Symposia, you know, is it right makes, might makes right? So you just bash it out, and that's whoever wins the argument wins. I mean, whoever wins the fight, the brutal fight wins, sometimes, because that's actually how the power is operating. That it forms this discourse that is sticky and you can't get out of it. And that becomes the truth. But that's not the true truth. Yeah.
I suppose something that I've been thinking about for a while in this conversation is this idea of dogma, which you're kind of bringing up, that where does truth sustain itself if so much of what we kind of consider a truth is built on kind of dogmatic opinion or stance. So then you have things that then become kind of socially conditioned truth, or something that's a strange belief, or something that sits on a line that then is compounded into the language of truth but doesn't actually act as a truth. So something I've been thinking about for a while is how do you produce truth when we're so used to the kind of aesthetics of something that's understood? Am I making sense? Understood as truth through action, but actually isn't a truth, it's an opinion, it's a stance. So it goes back to the idea of gameplay.
Well, I mean, Nietzsche talks about a time, I mean, every time I read this, I forget where it's in, I think it's in his Genealogy of Morals, but I can't remember if that's the right reference. He says, you know, isn't it amazing a time when people actually believed in, myths, and if the trees rustled a certain way when you walked by, that it meant X, Y, and Z, and if it rustled the other way, it meant Y. And I'm thinking, we're living this time again. So it used to not be in that time, but somehow we're now in that time again. Where fake news, true news, some other news. So, in a certain sense, whether or not there's the internet is almost irrelevant, or it's not irrelevant, but there's a different type of relevancy that goes on, because you could say that for millennium, it seems, not always, but often, people have believed that, people, including the people I'm going to refer to, that women are lesser beings than animals, or whatever the trajectory is, and that it's only by sheer willpower, I think, that people have fought against this, and not because it might have been a good idea to fight against it, but because it was the only thing to do.
Marjorie Kemp is quite an interesting character to kind of bring up and speak to that in some way. So do people know her work? So she was I don't know how, she was the first biography of the kind of medieval period, and even now is looked at as an example of an early form of schizophrenia, but only now because she is seen as a truth sayer, or that she could see angels, or that she had a direct connection with God. But contemporary readers see her use of God as a way of creating authority, or creating power, or creating a control over her
domain,
her society.
You could say that also about people that were accused of being witches, or in fact were witches.
And also some of the mystics like Catherine of Siena.
Yeah.
I mean, she used. I was reading a book where she used anorexia to control a power discourse over her authority. She starved herself, or allegedly starved herself.
Going into slightly different terrain, but it goes
But
back to
yeah,
that
yeah.
line of between a strange belief and a sanctioned reality or a sanctioned truth. That line constantly shifts, but actually the way that we use those lines doesn't shift. I think you could find similar kind of power play.
I don't know, because
now.
you could even make the argument, with magic, which actually magic and alchemy underwrites modernity. It's not that one grows from magic into science. Is that science is magic. It's not. They're not different in that sense, but they are different. But they're not different. And so on and so on. So it's about. This is the thing that Leotard is arguing, and it's what people have brought in, and maybe it's right, maybe it's not right. I'm not sure yet, but I'm fairly certain. So the notion of postmodernism is not that it's the next stage after modernism. It's kind of unfortunate the word post is in there, because in fact postmodernism for Leotard and all the people who call themselves postmodernists except for the new kids on the block, it's about Socrates was a postmodern. You don't have it was understanding how this cohesion operated, and if you are involved in the cohesiveness of this encounter, you are postmodern. Leotard goes farther to say that modernism has never happened, and that it requires the postmodern move in order to make modernism. By modernism he means the Enlightenment. He means reason. It hasn't happened yet. Woman hasn't been invented yet. Man hasn't been invented. All these are they're still up for grabs. And they will continue to be up for grabs. Now, we've gone a little bit of ways away from this thing called courage. We need to maybe, I don't know, we're coming to a close end to the seminar, but let's have some final words. Death,
destruction. When you're saying that postmodernism existed at another time and modernism is after, and you're basically getting rid of the time again, a linear planner.
Well, not getting rid of time, but you're getting rid of linearity. And when seeing it in a different, like you were talking about deep time, that's what I was interested in. So from the point of view of deep time, it's just a weird concept because you're talking about 10,000 years in one point. And that's just a very odd way of thinking, right?
Yeah, it's, well.
All right, Desmond.
No, I'm just sort of mulling that over because I've been thinking about the sort of oneself as some sort of filter in all of this, and how in some of this the kind of the influence for me is that this encounter is somehow there's something being dissolved. I can't quite explain it better than that at the moment, but there's some sort of dissolved that there's the kind of courage is a kind of giving over of sorts.
Very warm, very close. Close. Francis gets the last word.
Oh.
Sorry?
No, I kind of want to end with a bit of a question, just looking at the end of the second lecture, on page 30, where Foucault talks about how the parasiastic modality, he says it's disappeared, we find it grafted on or underpinned by these other modalities that he's already talked about. And this idea of something being grafted on, and he also says it plays a role. I guess I don't really have a conclusion about this, but when I took notes about it, it instantly felt like something that I guess I was trying to find a position on this, that if the idea of parousia is just now in a place of being grafted on or playing a role, or is kind of somehow working with these other modalities, can it therefore be something that we should be suspicious of, or is it? I don't want to say good, bad, because that's not what I mean, but if for example, a kind of like idea of parousia is then co-opted? Is he talking about it kind of being co-opted into other ways of?
It can't be co-opted.
It can't be co-opted.
But
Because do you know what I mean?
but a different way of putting this is that, I mean, I'm bringing Antonio Gramsci for a laugh. So Gramsci makes the point in the Prison Notebooks that there are what he calls organic intellectuals and traditional intellectuals. An organic intellectual is someone, don't laugh, like a football team, or the Rotary Club, or someone who you know when you hear them, it doesn't have to be a someone, but I mean,
So it could be a
body, a newspaper, a church, you know, whatever. An entity that when they have a position, it makes sense. It literally makes sense. The sense is made. That's an organic intellectual. Then there are these things called traditional intellectuals. They tend to be professors, teachers, whatever, priests. These are people whose job it is to produce the truth, or to, anyway, carry on the truth. And they are basically not worth the paper their degrees are printed on, is the kind of argument. So you have these organic intellectuals that actually build wherever, and by that I don't mean a person per se, though it can be a person. So Obama could be an organic intellectual. So wherever they go, something is built. And that something actually shifts. So Beckham, scary but true, organic intellectual. Because and it's not just popularity. It is also popularity, but there's something about this organicity, this ability to have a gravitas, something like that. And so it can be all these different things. You need to understand where they sit, because they could, and this is in fact what part of the Data Loan project is about, when you understand the organic intellectual side of things as opposed to the traditional, where you're not just getting the meaning of something, but you're getting the gravitas of it. You're getting the lyricism of it, something like that, how it works, and how crazy, and when you say how it works, it's how that cohesion gets established. So when that happens, that's an organic move. And it builds the system, it builds the society, it builds the social, it builds the real, it builds the is, something like that.
And this grafting is you would say, an example of that?
No, the grafting is the traditional intellectual.
Right, this is kind of what I was trying
The
to say.
traditional intellectual is somebody who might go through and have a lot of book learning, but doesn't know a damn thing. That would be a good example of a traditional intellectual. Like, for example, the people you're dealing with who don't understand that practice is what you're doing, but they have a lot of understanding. I'm serious, they would be traditional intellectuals. And most entities are, in terms that are in positions of power, and that is part of the problem, because if you're then really trying to actually learn anything, good luck, because you're usually running into traditional intellectuals. And this is Gramsci's argument. Now, Gramsci takes this, or Foucault takes this, not from Gramsci, but from this type of argument, that Parisia is kind of like the organic intellectual version of truth, versus the traditional intellectual would be this other kind of truth, the learned truth, the old thing, the Mark Twain argument, don't let, book learning get in the way of your education. Don't let learning get in the way of your education. And you have to really, and it's not just you have to privilege experience, because it's not even that. You have to know when you're in an environment that you're actually having this encounter. That kind of thing. Were you going to say something? Or Shannon, you were saying?
Well, maybe on courage. Isn't this courage that you're kind of risking your position in the discourse?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly right. Wait, Shannon and then, Anya and then Shannon.
I mean, I've just been coming at this text from a totally different angle, and then that maybe gets into the bataille as well.
Oh, good, okay.
So there's just a couple of things, and I'm thinking about them, so I'm struggling with them, so I cannot really kind of articulate them. I just want to throw them up as questions, but it's like, this kind of whole way of Foucault using like Aristotle and Demosthenes and the ancient Greeks and stuff like this, is that not already a problem for us? Because it's not already that system of thought in itself problematic, and is not in that system of thought truth seen as something that is definitely abstract and all enveloping.
Okay, put that not into a question, like a yes/no question. Make it as a claim.
So if I think of Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, all these people, then I think of truth as absolute and abstract on some level. What Foucault seems to, as far as I understand, say about the parasiast is that he has a duty to speak. He must say what he's saying in the most clear way possible, and he must sign it with her name, but at the same time, it is a truth that we can all establish for a particular situation as the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not his or her personal opinion or ethical kind of response to something, right?
Yes.
So what's really mashing my head up is that I feel like I'm caught between two systems of thought that grate against each other.
Well, you
like
would
we're having
be.
the Trojan horse thing.
Yeah, you would be if, in fact, there was an absolute truth that was being put forward. So I would have to challenge that part, because I don't think, I mean, Aristotle and Plato and Socrates are very different animals just to begin with, so Aristotle, I think, I don't know why people read him. It just annoys me because I think he's so reactionary. That's my own view. And he does have an absolute view, but Plato doesn't. I mean, he has a different version. He has the problem of the container.
But Plato also believes in a total separation between the physical and the abstract.
But he's not talking. He in the computer. He's not talking about Plato.
He's talking at some point about Plato.
But not in this moment.
But Socrates is Plato, essentially, right?
Well,
Plato writes down what Socrates says. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just feeling like we're dealing with a world that he's using as a kind of screen, let's say. I mean, I sort of see Foucault as having a certain fantasy about ancient Greece. And he's
as
using...
so many boys do. Yes.
And he's using... and I think that is his, like, I think he's really writing about, in some way, he's really writing about...
Gay life.
Gay existence, That's really what interests him. So he's using this as the kind of the world out of which he can draw certain things to illustrate that. Right?
But let's take the hard case, as it were. Let's say that is what he's doing. Let's say that he is looking at all of this because he's really thinking about gay encounter, gay sexual life.
Which is important.
No, I'm not saying it's not important.
Yeah.
I'm saying that actually that still then means that the temporality that we're talking about skips over a linear notion. Because even if it were the case that the gay thing was as it were there, as it were now, it's not like a progression. It's in fact this point of the is, that the past and the future collapse together to make the is, and that is what he's doing.
But I'm sort of struggling because I feel like he goes to a world that already has comes with a lot of baggage.
As the Greek person in the room.
Can I say something?
Of Western metaphysics, of a totally segregated society, that is all the things that it shouldn't be if it spoke the truth. It already, like, I don't know, I mean, and so the question for me would be, on the one hand, he speaks about this truth as being situated. So when he compares it to the truth that the teacher speaks or the truth that the sage speaks, he says it's a truth that actually is about, let me find
power structure.
He says, sorry, I'll just find the paragraph where he says that. I mean, he repeats that several times, but he essentially speaks about the fact that it's a situated thing. Yeah, like maybe that's clear at the end of page 18 and the beginning of page 19, where he says, the Parrhesias intervenes, says what is, but in terms of the singularity of individuals, situations, and conjunctures. So
sorry, where was that? I'm sorry.
it's the last line on the page 18
Oh, I see.
and the
Oh, yeah,
first
yeah.
line on the page 19. So it's about the singularity of individuals, situations, and conjunctures. So it's what you were saying. It's about what makes sense and what is the truth in that moment, not universally, right?
What do you mean about the Parrhesias?
Yes.
That he says what is the truth in that moment.
Yes.
So?
So we're talking about something that is not relative because it's specific to the moment, but something that can change all the time. It's really plastic, right?
But by changing all the time doesn't mean that it's
example
different. Okay.
No, I mean sort of women are inferior. That statement would not make any sense anymore in a society where there was no men and women and whatever else, right? So this is how we have to understand it, or
this is how we have to understand.
We're not speaking of
the sentence that says women are inferior.
What I'm meaning is, I understand Foucault as speaking about the truth that is always situated in that specific moment of singularity and of singular kind of constellations, let's say, cohesion, a singular form of cohesion. So that truth of that moment does kind of change over time. We're not speaking of sort of a kind of, what for me, in my limited knowledge of Greek philosophy, would be the idea of people like Plato, where there is a kind of, there is an essence, an essential and ultimate kind of abstract truth to things. So the question for me then is, how really does, before we even get to the game and the response, how really does a Parrhesiac ever know when they're really doing that? And to what extent there's like the illusion that you're doing that?
Yes, yes, I think that's a very important point, and
And do we care? Like, does it matter? I guess is also because he's so fixed on truth. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I just started to add to this, but even like, yeah, this subjective truth about a particular situation in the moment, but even in that situation, how one knows that the truth he thinks is the truth actually is the truth. Like, because like there may be a lot of people who think and who would fit this criteria of religion, but they may have absolutely different kind of truth in their mind. And who is the one who kind of judge what truth is truth?
So yeah, so just
okay.
to follow on from that. So one problem we get with Foucault and his text for me was this sort of idea of that we still have this notion of the individual that speaks the truth. And that it's something that a single position could provide, right?
I don't think he's saying that last part. I don't think he's saying that there's the individual, because the truth is something that comes out of this encounter. So it's not like one, like I have the truth and I'm going to give it to you as a present, and then you give it back to me. It's this thing that happens in the zero.
I am a Parrhesias because I am this encounter here now. I'm not before and then hi, I'm the Parrhesias and I'm gonna tell you the truth.
Okay, we're gonna leave it now because now we're exhausted, or anyway, we is exhausted, I don't know about you guys. Not because we're not gonna answer your question, Anya, but because the question that you're asking will form our next meeting, I think, because I think it's too important to leave it to when we're exhausted and haven't eaten anything. Is that okay? Are you all right with that?
It's turn this up?
Well, just, are you all right with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is everybody okay that we continue this?
Yeah.
And that we do chapters 3 and 4, because we're gonna keep building on this. This is very, you guys, this is excellent. I mean, I think that, was this a better way in this time? Good. Don't all speak out at once. The other thing I want